Hi, everyone, and welcome back to that UFO podcast. My name is Andy, and looking at the hearings from the last week, I've got Dan joining me for a bit of a random, ranty, chaotic one, I think. Dan?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot to get through. Just before we started, I wanted to say big congratulations to James Fox. His new documentary, The Program, now has a release date of December 16th. You can pick that up for $6.49 in the UK, which is a steal, I'm sure. And also, I just wanted to let everyone know that the holidays are coming. And if you guys wanted to get like a UFO podcast t-shirt or something like that, you can go to toinfinity.redbubble.com. That is to infinity. 2 is in the letters, not the number.
Thanks for letting me know you were going to
Welcome.
do that, Dan. Yeah. And we'll repeat that again at the end so people remember to actually go and do it and don't forget while we're about to record. So make a note, Dan, to repeat that at the end, please.
Sure.
We're going to go through the hearings first, and we'll do it in reverse order, okay? Because the newest one was fresh, and I've literally just watched it this morning. Dan, I think you watched it last night. It took me all of 30 minutes to watch the full thing, as it did everyone else. So on the 19th of November, Dan, we've had a hearing, this time in the Senate, with one witness, Dr. John T. Kozlowski, who is the director of AARO, taking over for Sean Kirkpatrick. AARO is the Pentagon DoD's UFO office, for anyone newer to the subject wondering what AARO is. And this is the guy who is running it for them, basically, Dan. Started in 2022. It's not had the best reputation, has it? It's had a couple of reports come out. It has not been well received. It's not really done much or accomplished much. And I would say either for or against the UFO topic, whatever it's trying to do as of yet. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, it's been fairly neutral, hasn't it? Like, it's kind of come in, it's been a bumpy road. Dr. Kirkpatrick, the previous director, hasn't really won anyone over. And its remit has been to investigate UFOs, or UAP as they call them now, as well as look at the historical reports. And all of these reports coming in from whistleblowers and witnesses. And they've been, I would say, not so successful on that front in breeding a trusting ground. So this hearing had a lot riding on it. I feel like they wanted to convince the public that, they turned over a new leaf, they could be trusted now, and that whistleblowers should go speak to them.
So I've seen really mixed reactions. I've not been online too much since last night or yesterday at all, right? But did it come across a little bit, like you've said, almost preachy, that it wasn't there to debunk or prove anything again, but it was like a give us a chance, spoiler alert, Dan, but the message for me was, witnesses, please come forward and speak to us, even if you've spoken to us before. We're not the guys who were here last time. And that
Yeah.
was really, I know we're going to get into detail, but that was the big takeaway for me. Like, please speak to us again.
Yeah, it kind of it gave off a rebranding vibe, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's going to be Coke Zero or New Coke. Now, when they changed the recipe and it was the same thing, and everyone hated it, and so on and so forth.
Or
Whether
Crystal
there was
Pepsi, because that was more
Crystal
transparent.
Pepsi.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. I like
Yep,
it.
thanks.
I like it. Yeah, definitely. There was an air of trying to convince people they were being a bit more transparent about things now, and there were some statements in this that we'll get into that were interesting to compare to a media roundtable that Dr. Kozlowski did when the AARO report was released a few days back, where reporters actually followed up on the questions or statements about the anomalous stuff. So we'll compare and contrast as we go.
So Kozlowski has a background in optics research, crypto mathematics, physics, engineering, and whatnot. So again, as you would expect in that sort of position in any government, pretty lofty in terms of his academic background, qualifications. The guy kind of knows what he's talking about. It's a hard one to put anyone in, I think, in terms of, do they know what they're talking about in terms of UFOs? Because who could you say literally does? You'd just be guessing, wouldn't you, or surmising that this would be the right person or that would be the right person, because
Yeah,
largely this is an unknown.
Yeah, exactly. How do you talk about something that we don't know what it is? Who's the most qualified to study something that we don't know what it is? If you're looking for a good striker, then you've got qualities that you look for in a good striker, right? Versus a defensive football player. But when it comes to this stuff, we don't know what we're dealing with. So who is the best to deal with it? So he seems very qualified, but it could end up that someone who's really good at drawing with crayons is the best to identify UAP or something. You know, we just don't know.
Would you have anyone else in there? Is there someone though you would think just from the exposure to the subject that you know of, you would think actually this might be a good person, or is it a case of you're better going with an unknown quantity?
I like that they've gone with an unknown quantity because it means that their kind of involvement with the UFO stuff previously is limited, and as we all know, it's a really muddy water, right? So
Mm,
I like that there's someone neutral there. Um, I like that it's someone data driven. I just think that before, because Dr. Kirkpatrick was kind of similar, right? He had
yeah,
great qualifications, very data driven, but there was kind of an arrogance and condescension about the way he approached it. Whereas you look at some investigators in history that kind of, you know, turned around. Dr. Hynek of Project Blue Book was famously, you know, skittish on the UFO stuff, but eventually kind of came around to believing, oh, there's actually something crazier here. You want someone that at the very least is open to the possibility of anomalous things being around. As for who I'd pick to go in there, I honestly wouldn't want to choose because I've been in the UFO subject for God knows how
mhm.
long, almost 40 years now. So, yeah, I wouldn't want to choose. You know, I want someone neutral, someone that hadn't touched this before, to give a good objective overview of everything.
Yeah, I think I definitely did. I don't know if you probably went along the same lines at the time. When Sean Kirkpatrick came in, we both said, you know, it's good again that someone's neutral, new to the subject. But I suppose you're just hoping they're not coming in with a remit already given to them from behind the scenes.
Yeah.
You don't want someone sitting directly over their right shoulder, Dan, the whole time watching them doing what they're doing, do you?
Right.
Um,
What? How did you feel about that, by the way? So, for
it
anyone that
was
hasn't
so
watched,
odd.
Andy's referencing Susan Goff, the Pentagon spokesperson, was sat in frame just to the right of Dr. Kozlowski. Susan Goff was accused in the other hearings of being someone with a you know, psychological warfare background. And she was just there giving side eye the whole time. At certain moments, it almost felt like John was looking over his shoulder a little bit nervous, just wary that he was being watched. You know, didn't do
Yeah.
any favors.
I got big Ghostbusters 2 vibes. You know, you've got Vigo, the
Yeah,
Carpathian in the big painting, for those who may not remember, who just stares at you and you think it's Sigourney Weaver famously says, "It's like he's following me around the room." I felt whenever I was watching it, I was watching Kozlowski and the camera, you know, was on him. She would, like you say, she was always in frame. So that
always.
must be deliberate, by her design or someone else's. And I just felt whenever I looked away from him, she was looking at me and judging me,
Yeah, she looked into the camera a few times, I swear, and I was
making the
it
phone
was
call.
really unnerving. And she didn't move her head to look at John either. She just moved her eyes, so it just felt really kind of uncanny valley. And at certain points in this, I almost wanted, you know, either Gillibrand or Ernst to just say like, "What are you doing here? Like, why are
Yeah,
you here? Go
you
sit in
just
the
move.
rogues gallery.
Yeah.
Just move.
Mhm.
Like, we're talking
Yeah.
to John. Go away."
Yeah, and listen, I actually tried with George Knapp, to mention, and I think I've probably said the same before to you, Dan, that I don't know how much with the Susan Goff stuff, is it a bit of conspiracy or easy pickings to be like, well, that's her job and she's there, so she's one of the bad guys, and, you know, this kind of stuff doesn't help with people like me
No.
trying to think reasonably and logically and going, wait a minute, are we getting a bit too conspiratorial with this? Because there she was again, you know, it was like, oh,
Yeah.
Christ, man. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. Almost just hovering in the background like a spook. You know, it was just really imposing, and I think it's fair for people to be asking, you know, is she kind of a puppet master here? Like, what's going on? Like, I
yeah,
understand that she controls messaging for the Pentagon, the DoD, and AARO, but at the same time, I don't know why she was there. I just
yeah.
don't.
Bad enough if she was there in general or gets the rumor mill going, but like you say, to be in frame the entire time was just weird. So you mentioned, Dan, it was chaired by Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who many folks will know from the UAP topic. It's been a bit of a roller coaster for her publicly. I think if you're involved in, I bet she's got very little idea at all as to how she's thought about in the UFO community. And, you know,
Yeah,
everyone has this opinion of her, and it's kind of been really positive, then really negative, and then a bit indifferent and then mixed. And the other senator was Joni Ernst, who was beside her. It was a pretty quiet affair, wasn't it? The room was pretty empty. Most of the chairs were empty. I think I noticed Nick Gold at the back of the room.
Yeah,
on
Nick
the
Gold
aisle.
was there. I messaged him. I was like, I see you. You're on TV.
And he said, I can't message you back. Susan Goff's giving me into trouble for
Yeah,
texting.
right.
But yeah, so, and if anyone else is there, well done for getting in, but it looked like a pretty quiet affair. So in this hearing, Kirsten Gillibrand wanted to probe why UAP, and I'm paraphrasing loads here, folks. I'm taking notes on my phone.
I like the pun, by the way.
What did I say?
Probing. Not intentional.
Genuinely not intentional. No, okay, okay. Right, okay, thanks. But I should have said yes, that was intentional. I'll delete the other one. So she wants to probe why, I don't even realise I've done that, why UAP are infiltrating bases such as Langley and other sensitive airspace. That seemed to be her big thing here. She talks about, Go Fast and other cases having been resolved, and we're going to talk about, those as Kozlowski talks about them. She hopes individuals come forward with AARO under new leadership. And like you say, I think it's going by that restaurant that you've been burned by several times, or that takeaway, and it's got up in the window now under new management.
Yep.
But the guy in charge looks strangely like the last guy's brother, so you're not sure.
Just has a mustache on. And,
yeah,
that
peels off very slightly. Yeah. His name's Tiago instead of John. So that's an in-joke, sorry, nice. Folks. Not a very good one, but so yeah, like you said, Dan, you're spot on when you said about rebranding. This hearing, again, I'm jumping to the end here, didn't move things forward. It didn't move things back for me either. It's just kind of treading water. AARO's still in a poor place as it has been, but they're basically saying, come on, you can trust us this time. Yeah, that's what I got from Gillibrand's opening statement. And then Ernst basically came in and said, we have to ask if these technologies are foreign adversarial technology, i.e. China or Russia, or I liked her phrasing of unknown scientific phenomena that will challenge our current understanding. And I thought that was pretty fair from her. She used a very, very short amount of time really well. So what's your thoughts on that kind of phrasing?
Yeah, I love the phrasing. I love that they lent into the anomalous stuff here a bit more. Gillibrand, I was disappointed in for a real specific reason. She started off talking about, she mentioned Go Fast, Tic Tac, Gimbal. And she said there was public interest about those cases and that she wanted to hear more about them. We didn't hear more about Tic Tac and Gimbal during the hearing, and there was just no follow-up. No follow-up, excuse me. And it just led me to, I kind of felt, it felt like a sleepy affair. I don't know if that was because it was just quieter in the room than the other hearing that we'll talk about or what, but it was almost like, Susan Goff had slipped her some sleeping tablets in the closed session before. And I think a lot of the criticism of this particular hearing can be kind of pinned on the fact that usually they do open hearings and then they'll go into a closed door meeting about stuff. Here, it was the other way around. They had their closed door meeting, and then this was kind of just a public showing. And it felt like prearranged talking points, like people just kind of getting through things that they'd agreed to talk about. But there were some positives. We had the line trotted out again. No evidence of extraterrestrial life there. So again, very specific statement. We're not talking about non-human intelligence there. We're talking about extraterrestrials. John did say...
John?
Yes.
Yeah. He said verifiable evidence. He
didn't verifiable. Say no evidence. Yes. And this is where I was going to go with it. It's kind of threading the needle, right? What is verifiable evidence of ET? Do they need to see, an alien holding a clock in today's newspaper whilst going back to their planet and being tracked? Can we even track them in that way? So I would have liked to see some follow-up on stuff like that, where when he said verifiable, they said, well, what do you mean? What would verifiable look like to you? How are you doing this? Is it just...
Can I ask you on that then? Do you think in the closed door session where they can maybe speak a bit more openly, but also speculate without fear of the public hearing or ridicule, that perhaps in that setting, a Kozlowski would say to Gillibrand and Ernst, we've got reason to believe that a small percentage of these cases are potentially non-human, and by that I mean alien, extraterrestrial, or something that we don't understand. Do you think that's likely to happen there? So it's easier to then trot out into the public setting and say, right now we're just going to go with no verifiable evidence of ET.
Yeah, I mean, it's a language game, right? People will watch or hear that statement, and the skeptics will run with, "There are no ET, you're all a bunch of idiots," and the believers will run with, he threaded the needle, and he's not talking about non-human intelligence. In a way, I feel that's almost more dangerous than just kind of doing the speculation in public. We want to hear the senators following up with these questions, and to hear that little bit of speculation there. And then it's the media's job to kind of talk about that in a sensible way, to not say, if he says we have reason to believe, like as you said, then that's not confirmation. It's not denial. It kind of leaves us in the same place. But there's none of this just stupid wangly language around it that people just sit there second guessing and going, they're not trustworthy.
Yeah. Did you feel the senators, only two of them speaking, were far less aggressive with their questioning or following up than the Congress folk were? And I wonder again, is that down to, like you say, though, quite rightly, that they've had the closed session first? So what I would imagine would be the good stuff, and I don't mean they're talking about, where these things come from, etc. Just there's probably a little bit more openness in there. And then this is a session they kind of have to have, whereas Congress are having that big open session, trying to get something to piece together for a skiff, potentially. We'll get to all that, and not getting anywhere. So like you say, that maybe speaks to the fact that you say, Dan, it was more laid back, a little bit by the numbers, almost skipping over. Like they've had like an hour long session to do and went, do you know what, we can do this in half an hour. Like let's just hit the key points.
Yeah, it definitely feels like, I mean, it was 4:30 p.m. their time. So it definitely had an air of, oh, come on, I've got to pick up the kids from school. And they just kind of got through the answers. And, you made a joke about it only being half hour. When it finished, I literally wrote in my notes, like, is that it? Like, that's just all we got? Okay, sure, no worries then.
I think I saw you comment that either in the Discord or on Twitter X. I can't remember what it was, but the very few time I was online last night, or this morning, I'm sure I'd seen you'd made some kind of, what is that it?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it must have been a quick one.
Yeah.
See, on Kozlowski's statement you mentioned as well, Dan, he said by his nature he's kind of drawn to tough scientific problems. I like that. I'm probably going to be more positive with this than some people think, but only because I don't think there was a whole lot to it. I'm just trying to be, okay, let's look at the good points. Like you, I'm very much on the, if it's a rebranding, you have to give it some semblance of a chance because they're only asking really for one thing from this. So yeah, like we said, doesn't need to be a UFO guy, just someone who's open to whatever this might be. I don't feel Kirkpatrick was ever open to that ET hypothesis. And I at least feel, and again, when I saw the negative comments and then watched the hearing, Ernst and Gillibrand and Kozlowski at least seem open to, we don't know what some of this stuff is. And it could be something like Ernst said about that kind of scientific phenomena we don't understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you mind if I read? It's kind of a lengthy little bit, but it was from the media roundtable after the AARO report was released a few days back. And the journalist just kept following up when Kozlowski was talking about the anomalous stuff. And I felt it was richer than what was kind of said in the hearing. But these are direct quotes from him. He said, it's definitely not all just drones and UAS. So we have several particularly interesting cases we're working with within the office, working with our partners to downgrade several of those cases so we can talk about them publicly. But there are interesting cases that I, with my physics and engineering background and time in the IC, the intelligence community, I do not understand. And I don't know anybody else that understands them either. So of these cases that I'm thinking of, there's a variety of them. The cases at the top of my head are spread out over the last year and a half. I'm sure there's some other anomalous ones a little further back too. Sorry, I lost my, but the ones, sorry, I've lost my place. Damn it. So
please hold the line. We'll try to connect you.
There is some video footage for a few of the cases, not all of the cases. So it's not just eyewitnesses, but in each of the cases I'm particularly interested in, there were multiple eyewitnesses, and there's additional data to go with them. It remains to be seen whether or not that additional data is going to be sufficient for us to either resolve the case, understand whether it's a UAV, bird, or balloon, or say something substantive about the nature of unknown phenomena. The cases I'm thinking of, there was no commonality across the different cases. There were different morphologies, so orbs, cylinders, triangles. In one of the cases, it's been happening over an extended period of time. and it is possible that there's multiple things happening. There could be some UAV activity in the environment that's getting confused or conflated with UAP activity. So we're trying to tease that out right now. We're going to be hosting a declassification workshop so we can make sure we're implementing the best practices from across the DoD and the IC. All of that takes more time than I think the public would like for it to take, but we're working on it. We recognize that the types of cases that I was just talking about are, from my perspective, true anomalies, and we're going to need significant scientific rigor to address those. And yes, the US government has a lot of nice scientists, a little bias there, but we're going to need the help of academia and the public to address some of these. So we need to build that more transparent partnership. I thought that was a wonderful statement. And it would have been, if that had been read during the hearing, especially that bit with, me and my engineering background and IC experience, I cannot explain these and I don't know anyone who can. He just seems much more open there, talking about the anomalous cases and willing to share them with the public, to engage the public on this anomalous stuff. Because, after all, there's the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. That's what their job is. They're meant to be looking at the anomalous stuff. So I was really heartened by that statement. And as much as, I was down on the hearing last night, that statement is almost a 180-degree turn from where Kirkpatrick was when he was in charge of AARO. So I don't know. I'm a little bullish on it. I was disappointed in the hearing, not because of Koslowski, but mostly because a lot of what I just read out wasn't really present there. But he did speak about 3 anomalous cases, right?
Just before you get to those,
sure.
The hearing lacked much content, Dan. I think that's probably why some people might be frustrated. Some people just might not like in general what was said, which is fair. But I just felt it was very empty. He did say within the hearing, to your statement you've read there, AARO does not believe every object is a bird or balloon and is making attempts to resolve cases. And I was like, yeah, again, fair comment. Like they're saying the opposite of the old debunker one, that we're not saying everything is a bird or a balloon. There is some really interesting stuff. Just before he got to the cases, he mentioned the trend charts, Dan. And I thought it was interesting. He mentioned they've got data, and he showed some slides from 96 to 2024. And he says that sensor placement has caused a bias in reporting, which they're hoping to resolve by 2025, maybe next June. He said most reporting happens between 15 and 25,000 feet, as that's where most of these sensors are, whether that's an aircraft in the air or some kind of balloon they have or spy system they've got up and running, whatever it might be, unmanned aerial vehicle. They will have unmanned drones that are sensor systems in the sky. And he says that's where most of these things are. So straight away, there's a bias that a lot of the data they are getting is from a very specific region. So if you want to look at AARO, potentially looking at USOs under the water, then they're not getting much data from that because it's not being reported. They've not got the sensor system access. What they do have access to is a very specific range. Again, you can go above that and look at things in low Earth orbit or atmosphere or in space. They're not getting the access to this stuff that they need, or they just don't have the sensor data required. So I thought that was, again, a fair thing and something for people to be mindful of, that that is a bit of transparency from his point of view, I feel. I'll always put the asterisks unless he is lying, but I'm taking him his word in face value there.
And so. I'm just going to throw in there, I saw a few people saying, well, he didn't take an oath, he could have lied. You don't have to take an oath in Congress. Like, it's the same whether you lie in front of Congress or not. So the oath is really performative. Mike Gold in the other hearing did the Vulcan salute during his oath, which I'm sure some people would be like, it doesn't count then, does it?
And I said the same thing. I was like, you can be so precious and protective about your own country, and this goes for anyone, no matter where you live, but swearing on a Bible, doing an oath, promising you won't lie, under perjury or whatever, I'm sorry, given what's being discussed and the secretive nature of it, and all this compartmentalization, the rumours that people have died for the UAP subject or UFO topic, have been unalived, as the kids call it online. I think there's someone going under oath doesn't really make a difference to me, because I don't think they're being any more or less honest just because they're quote unquote under oath. So yeah, like you say, doesn't make a difference to me.
Yeah, it's same.
I do have a note here about Goff, by the way. I've put Goff on camera as extremely off-putting and ominous.
I think that's a good summary.
It was about that point I was like, she's looking at me.
Yeah, well, I didn't notice her at first, and then as it went on, I was like,
Sorry,
"There's a
Dan, 2
clear
seconds. I'm just
presence
going to
on the
pause the
screen."
recording. I've just got a text message from Susan Goff. Stop that shit. Okay, sorry. Carry on.
Yeah, she was really off-putting. So should we talk about the cases that were shared? There were 6 that were shared. There were 3 resolved cases and 3 anomalous cases. The resolved cases is the well-known Aguadilla, Puerto Rico case, where John said that they're fairly sure that what they're actually seeing is a mix of kind of parallax, making something close to the camera look like it's going faster than it is, and that when it splits in the water and disappears, that actually the object is matching the temperature of the water behind it. Um, then we have Go Fast, which they go with the parallax thing. They say that there's a paper on their website and people can check their math, which I like that comment because all of their work should be transparent. People should be able to, just like, it's fundamental science that you do peer review. People should be able to check your work in, agree with you, disagree with you. I would like to see more of that from them, especially with this Aguadilla one as well, because I know there'll be a lot of objections about that one out there, especially with the idea that it matches the temperature of the water behind it when, that didn't happen until that particular moment, even though the object's been over water for a few kind of, I don't know, like 10, 20 seconds in the video by that point.
Am I wrong, though? Did he not say that they don't think the object was ever over the water and always remained over the airport? Was that not his comment, though, within the video? So the
Might have been,
appearance
yeah.
of the
And
object being over the water is wrong. That's what I took from something he said.
yeah, sure. And yeah, either way, he's saying that it matches the background
Yeah.
temperature basically of the water, and that's why it appears to disappear. And there were multiple objects, and we've just seen, because of our vantage point, one up until that point. And it could be a few balloons kind of strung together and stuff like that. I think that one will be the hardest for people to swallow. Like I said, the Go Fast one, cool. Put up a peer review on the website, let people have at it. The academia stuff, working with academia to kind of solve these things, I liked. And then there was a video that we haven't seen before from Mount Etna, where a UAP appears to kind of go through the plume of the volcano, which again is kind of said to be a parallax issue and also the temperature issue, that actually this UAP wasn't near the volcano at all. And it just appeared to kind of pass through the plume of the volcano. I haven't seen that video before, so it was nice to see something new, whether it was resolved or not. I was like, fair. There's a little transparency there, and it's all relative to what Dr. Kirkpatrick gave us. So,
How do you feel about them saying these videos are close to being resolved / we think they are resolved, as opposed to actually having resolved them?
in science, you don't deal with absolutes. You deal with percentages. So there's a kind of system called a sigma system, and you'll get like 4 sigma, 5 sigma, and so on and so forth, and they're all levels of certainty. Once you reach about 6, they're pretty damn certain that that's what they're dealing with, but they'll never say we absolutely know that this is happening, because there's always the chance that they could be wrong. So they always kind of leave the wiggle room. Someone I spoke to last week was even saying in their institution where they work at, I'm fairly sure they said it was CERN, like whenever they read a paper, they have these sessions where they just call poking hole sessions, where everyone will get together in a room and they'll just poke holes in the paper. And that's part and parcel of what that process is. No one gets
You
offended.
mean
It's all
verbally,
about,
they don't literally sit with a piece
yeah,
of paper and
exactly. Yeah, just literally poking holes
physically
through
poke
it.
holes in it, yeah.
So it's part and parcel of this to kind of do that. So yeah, I'm hoping for more transparency on that front from AARO, because certainly Dr. Kirkpatrick never showed his workings, and we also don't know who the people are analyzing this stuff. With peer-reviewed papers, it's kind of a no-no to be. You can publish them anonymously, but it's kind of a no-no, because then who do you email to disagree with, right?
Yeah.
And have the debate and say, oh, you could do this, and give them new ideas to kind of shore up their work. So yeah, we need to know who is behind these review panels that AARO is using. I was disappointed that they weren't more transparent about that during these hearings.
Sidebar, Dan. Okay, so Aguadilla, fair enough. I think some of those videos that came out, was that one of the DHS ones, Department of Homeland Security videos?
It was, I can't remember. It was, I mean, it was ages ago that this one came out. We did have a DHS drop not too long ago.
Yeah. So whatever it was, it's similar to like the Bruja, like the witch ones and stuff like that. Okay, and the rubber duck videos, I think, in terms of they came out in that sense, right? For
These
me,
names are hilarious. Anyone listening who hasn't seen the rubber duck video, it's like, what?
I know, probably doesn't help, does it? Okay, so they could be various different things. I am all for them putting this stuff out and there being genuine scientific reasons as to why people who know far more than I do, and you're better with this stuff than me, I'll always give you that credit.
But still, I mean, not an authority on anything.
No,
right?
but you're not a qualified fucking physician or whatever it is, you know. So, but then you've got other folks who can go and look at the math and should be able to go, yeah, based on what they've put out here in these numbers, it's pretty likely it's nothing spectacular, and it's just a video that has had stories attached to it that has then grown arms and legs, you know. Go fast. We've always looked at it as, oh, look, that's one of the Tic Tac objects. It's been caught. The video itself's from 2016, January 2016. And that, for me, they're saying the object is actually at 13,000 feet above the water and not above the surface of the water, which is what the video makes it look like. Again, this video, there's rumours that it makes a right-angled turn. I think Ryan Graves has commented on this already on various news outlets as well. So it seems there are people coming out and saying from that one that the idea that it's something more prosaic higher up, they don't agree with. Again, you're then battling, well, we need all the data versus the testimony and the stories. So there might be a bit of an issue with that one. Could that one, though, potentially be damaging to folks who have always pinned disclosure or progress on Go Fast, Gimbal, Tic Tac? Because you put those three together and all of a sudden, if one of them drops off as being, you know, debunked, which for me, I think for you, Dan, you'd be like, yeah, fair enough, that's fine. But I think for a lot of folks, they may then package the three together and go, well, if that one was bullshit, then the other two could be or might be as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We've said often that, you know, the progress in 2017 that we've kind of seen snowball and become the hearings that we've had this week and last year all come from those three videos and the reports that happened. So if you could rug pull those three videos, then a lot of the public interest would go away. And it's a shame because there's so much more here. And Go Fast is a wonderful little microcosm of it, because Ryan Graves rightly pointed out in his comments about this that all of the analysis of Go Fast focus on the object being, the solution being parallax, and that it's not actually going that fast. Ryan Graves correctly points out, well, you're only combating the name of the video there. You're just proving that it's not going fast. We still don't know what that object is. We didn't know what it was when we were out there. It wasn't the only object. There were a whole series of events that kind of went on around that time, including Gimbal, which wasn't mentioned, even though Gillibrand said she wanted it mentioned and didn't follow up. So it kind of, there's a kind of an A-B possibility in me, you know, always got to kind of hold those things in this community of, yeah, okay, sure, that one object might not be very interesting, but what about these wider series of events for which we've been told that there's radar video of these things? You know, Ryan has produced mock-ups of what that looked like, of, you know, the gimbal being followed by multiple objects that were in a kind of an arrow formation, and that gimbal was kind of darting around and made sudden movements and things like that. I want to see them kind of dive into these things wholesale instead of just combating a name of the video that the pilots didn't even give it. You know, we all associate the audio with that video of the pilots going, woohoo, look at that thing go. Oh my God, did you just get target lock? And it's been correctly pointed out many times that there's no proof that that audio is from that event. Might be, can't say. But when the DoD confirmed that the video was a UAP and released it, there was no audio with it. So focusing on the object's speed is kind of a misdirect to me. So like, yeah, great, cool. It's not going that fast. What is it? You know?
Yeah. No, fair. That's fair. I just wonder if there was going to be an easy win for debunkers, or let's just go full conspiracy here. If Susan Goff really wanted to damage the UFO UAP community, and a lot of folks who are newer to the subject, and like you quite rightly say, those 3 videos have made the biggest impact on a lot of folks to get involved, and that's what a lot of the news channels play over and over again whenever now they talk about UFOs in the US. If you could discredit all 3 in a short period of time, then that would go a hell of a way to putting that genie back in the bottle, whether people like it or not.
I agree with you. It really would. And because the ambiguity is kind of the God in the gaps is where people live, right? And if you can close those gaps, then a lot of the interest goes away, even though there's all this other stuff going on.
Yeah. Before we get to the 3 cases, just to I've got some chronological notes. Gillibrand says that individuals have been reluctant to engage with AARO. Everyone knows this, that whistleblowers have either spoken to them, or individuals have spoken to AARO, or people have been reluctant to speak to AARO. Others have come forward and said they've spoken to AARO when AARO said they haven't spoken to them. It's been a bit of a mess. Kozlowski says they have reached out to folks who, again, have already spoken to AARO, and they want them to come back and talk if they didn't feel they were listened to, or they didn't feel comfortable the first time round, or if they just didn't want to speak to AARO at all. Again, they've kind of put they've opened the door and said, please come in and speak to us.
Which is kind of throwing Kirkpatrick under the bus, right? In his approach.
Yeah, 100%. It might not be, but I would agree with you that that's the way it looks to me as well. I just think people aren't going to be happy either way, because I see loads of folks saying, okay, AARO's done, it's bullshit, it's gone. I think we were both there at that point, I think, as well, where there was no coming back for it. I think the reputation's never been lower, like we've said, but are you in a place, Dan, where you think under Kozlowski and Gillibrand even, I don't think she came across desperate, but I think she seemed to be appealing to people to really give this a chance. And let's be fair, and Dan, please tell me if I'm wrong, a lot of what AARO could do, and folks like Gillibrand, and this is going to include the other hearing as well that we've not even got to yet, the best work it can do and the most progress we can get, the public won't see or hear.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's all going to be behind closed doors, and this is something that I wanted to talk about on this show anyway, because when we look at people like Lou Schellenberger, Tim Gallaudet, and Graves and Fravor and all these other people that kind of coming forward, Michael, Nell, I could spend ages just reading off the names. They're not asking for full open kimono disclosure. They're not asking for the US government to tell us every single thing that they know. They're asking for specific things to let us know that we are not alone, so that we can start doing as a public what we will do with that. We don't need to know that the US has maybe got certain sensors that can detect these things and so on and so forth. There's going to be stuff that they want to keep back for national security reasons. So we're kind of in this weird arm wrestle, right? Where we're supporting senators who want a little bit of disclosure, but expecting full disclosure at the same time. And there's a clash and a tension there, I think. And this is why people are clamoring for whistleblowers, because whistleblowers will, naturally kind of tell us more than the establishment wants us to know. So we've got to be mindful of that. What my disclosure isn't what Kozlowski's disclosure is. And there was a great moment during this hearing where Lou Elizondo is quoted as saying UAPs are real in the other hearing. And Kozlowski says, yeah, they are. And then he kind of goes more into, well, there are anomalous things in the sky that we don't know, and we've got to study them and so on and so forth. But just those two statements, Lou and Kozlowski agreeing UAP are real. Turn the clock back 20 years and imagine a whistleblower and the US government saying, yeah, UFOs are real. It's shattering. That's disclosure to many people, but it doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to get everything aside from that. Gillibrand and the Gang of Eight and all the other senators are going to know more than us about this stuff and be privy to more, because they have classification levels that we as members of the public do not have. There was a little telling thing here as well, where Gillibrand said that since the 40s to now, there have been so many unresolved cases over 75 years, and the US government have been... Oh, nice. Cool. The US government have been very interested in taking it seriously, which is amazing to hear her say, But when you go back through history and you look at the US government's attitude towards people reporting UAPs, it has not been to take it seriously. It has been to downplay, to stigmatize, to tell them they're crazy, to tell them they're hallucinating, to go, oh, you drink too much, those famous post-cognac hallucinations. It has not been as forthcoming. that was a phrase, I think it was Bryce Zabel used it, not in his wonderful book.
I was going to say, Christ, that is really,
I loved it.
That's really telling, isn't it? As to someone's status in society
post-mead hallucinations.
Yeah, post-mead. I think people will largely hate that statement. I don't think it's entirely unfair. I just don't think she worded it particularly well, because you've got someone there sitting representing almost the highest level of US government saying the government has loved this subject for decades. Look how much work we've done. And it's like, yeah, but the pharmaceutical companies have loved drugs for decades. Look at all the good they've done. Yeah, but also look at the other side of that as well. Like you said, she mentions 40s right through, Dan, to now, mentioning that the March report didn't downplay the subject that AARO put out. And it's just highlighting how much work is being done. And that the part I thought was relevant was fair. She said the report was put together by a group who had no access to first-hand reporting or information, which again was fair. Transitional time, that's been a problem with AARO from the beginning. It's always seemed to be transitional or something else happening or something interrupting. AARO needs not transparency. Well, it needs that. It needs consistency, at least, so you can apportion blame or praise either way on the right people doing the right work. Because right now, from AARO's point of view, AARO is John Kozlowski.
Yes.
AARO's not just John Kozlowski, though.
No,
however, that's the face of it. So I thought she was right in some ways, but I think largely that statement won't hit home, because it sounds like someone representing the government saying, come on, look how much good work we've done and you're not being fair on us. And you're spot on, Dan, when you say that, yeah, let's talk about all the shit you've done the other way that hasn't been particularly good or fair in that sense. So
kind of felt like whitewashing. And I think you're spot on there about the report as well, that you know, it was a bunch of people without really many resources kind of doing things. And we kind of have an equivalent on the other side of the fence as well, where Schellenberger in the other hearing, as part of his opening statement, submitted a document that was about 200 pages long that was essentially a member of the public's version of that historical report. And it is not perfect either. You know, there are people mentioned in there like David Adair, who is, you know, he's the affable Forrest Gump of the UFO community, where he's just been anywhere and everywhere and involved in every case and so on and so forth, because he's just, you know, a doting, lovely old man, and people don't like to kind of step to him when he's saying these things because he's seen as harmless. And there are a lot of other things in there that which are questionable, but also there's some really good stuff in there. So I think, you know, those two reports almost need to have a baby. But where do you even start with stuff like that? Because we don't have the info. We've just got what's on the internet, right? And I don't think I need to tell anyone or convince anyone that the internet's full of shit.
Yeah. Do you know what it's a bit like, Dan? And I'm going to come up with this right off the top of my head. So imagine I tasked you with going around all the major fast food chains, and they need to come up with like the ultimate burger, right? And people are going to hate my pronunciation of burger there or not, but that's the way I say it. So yeah, burger. And you need to go to KFC, McDonald's, Subway. I'll throw in some US one. What, like Wendy's, Hungry Jack's in the US,
Shake Shack, In-N-Out.
Yeah. So all these different places, right? And they've all got their own secret recipes, and you need to try and pull them all together to get all the best ingredients they've got each and make the ultimate burger. How easy do you think you're going to find it?
Yeah, exactly. Not at all, right?
That's what a lot of these Congressmen and women, and senators, even at those high levels, I feel are trying to do with the UFO subject, where they're having to go to all these little fast food chains / governmental compartments and get all their best secrets and bring them all together for this like puzzle we always talk about, and go, right, here are loads of different pieces, here's what we can do. And they're not getting that at all. What they're getting largely is someone saying, here's a Happy Meal, crack on, enjoy your day. And that's not what they want. They want the secret sauce, don't they? Yeah. So I get why it's frustrating as well from their point of view. You were going to bring up, Dan, the three cases then, which Kozlowski talks about.
Oh yeah, that's right. Just before I do that, I just wanted to one of the quotes that stood out to me that was just before that. Kozlowski said, "We don't have domain awareness. We don't have domain superiority." if there are any conspiracy theories about this whole UFO thing that think it's for something, one of the major benefits of looking for UFOs and plugging holes in the defensive gap is that the US gets better air superiority out of this, or domain superiority. So they look for more, they'll see more. This is what happened with the Chinese spy balloon and all of those other incursions. They bothered to look. They switched the filters off instead of just looking for what they expected to find. So yeah, the three cases that John spoke about. One was law enforcement. A member of law enforcement observed a large orange orb, went to investigate. As he pulled up to the area, he saw a black object about the size of a Prius. It turned kind of a 45-degree angle and shot up vertically. It was silent. It emitted a bright red and blue light, which illuminated his car as bright as if it was fireworks. That one, he kind of said that they might have a resolution on it. Really curious to what that might be, because that sounds nuts, right?
Me too, yeah. I thought that one was a little bit odd, because like you say, he gives us really interesting anecdote and then says, but it may be on its way to being resolved. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Unless he comes out and says, okay, it's aliens. That was the resolution.
The resolution is it's truly anomalous.
Fair enough.
Then, yeah, fair. Then the other one was that there was a US facility. 2 cars were leaving it about 9 a.m. They saw a large, I wasn't sure if he said silk or slick, but it was a metallic cylinder that was stationary in the sky. There was a bright white, I don't know, he might be describing like the
it's like the softest sounding UFO I've ever heard of. Oh, it was silk. Oh, nice. Like velour.
Yeah, just
I don't know why. I've never heard that.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, there was a bright white light behind the object, and then they both disappeared. Fairly anomalous. We hear about these cigars and cylinders and stuff in UFO world all the time. So nice, good. Tic Tacs, yeah. I like that he's being open about that one. Then there was another one. The last one he mentioned was that there were aircraft that were flying parallel to each other, kind of taking imagery of one of the aircraft, and a small looking object flew between the planes. He also said that this one was close to being resolved and that the object actually might have been further away than not between them. But again, I want to see the working. Let everyone see your working. If you have confidence in your resolution, show everyone the working, and let's get to the science.
Right. How did you feel about this then, Dan? Because what I've got here, put it this way, I'll read my exact note for this, right? For everything you have just said, here's my note. Talks about 3 cases. First is an orb case, may have been resolved. Just some interesting anecdotes, felt pointless. Don't know what it was. If this was an attempt to try and sound like they weren't being dismissive, I don't know. Because for me, he's given us 3 cases, all anecdotal, which is great depending on the setting. But like you say, you've got the Senate talking to the head of AARO here. So I feel if John Kozlowski's coming on to that UFO podcast or whoever's podcast, Joe Rogan's podcast, and sharing anecdotes, fine. When you're sitting in front of the Senate and you're sharing some stories, far less impactful. But when you're sharing 3 stories, of which 2 of them you claim, by the way, they were probably something prosaic or explainable, straight away for me, you're sharing 1 story that's an anecdote.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know how I felt about that. Again, does that go down to what you said before, Dan? Which I never clicked until you said it. It felt a bit rushed. It felt a bit pushed, forced. That let's hoy it in. If it was trying to be, if it's going back to that statement that he made previously about, not every UAP is a bird or a drone. It could be something really interesting. Great. I felt that landed a bit flat just for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. It was. I found that I enjoyed it relative to what Kirkpatrick did, not because it was some big bar jumped where I was like, oh yeah, great, they're definitely talking about anomalous stuff. This is where it would have been great to see cases with video evidence that were anomalous. He did go on to say that he wants to be able to declassify the anomalous stuff so he can share it.
Which was good.
So,
thumbs up.
Which was good. Yep, thumbs up there. But clearly hadn't been done for the hearings. It's the Anomaly Resolution Office. Let's get some anomalies. Like show us the anomalies. Show us your methods and workings. And this was the meat that I wanted from this hearing that just wasn't there. It felt like fluff and back patting for a job kind of half done. Cue
Dan's new T-shirt of Tom Cruise in what's the movie? What's the Show Me the Money one?
Crap. Jerry
Why?
Maguire.
Jerry Maguire. Show me the money, but show me the anomalies. That's and it's
I
John
like that.
Kozlowski shouting down the phone with Kirsten Gillibrand on the other one.
Coming
So
soon.
yeah, coming soon. I'm with you on that one. I think Senator Ernst at this point had asked, has AARO involved academia or outside organisations in its work and research, alluding to, are they using universities, professors, and their capabilities, their research facilities to look into this, which is a great point. Kozlowski says it lacks partnerships with universities, largely down to that need to declassify, Dan, which you have said. And when they can't hand data to professors, that's an issue.
Yeah.
Again, leading to that point where you say they're trying to get more stuff declassified to give them it, but that's a great point. In the community, we know Gary Nolan as a very well-respected, Nobel-nominated immunologist working on the UFO topic. There are thousands of Gary Nolans out there, but the issue is there are so many of them that must be being approached, and they're asking for data, and it's like, we can't give you 99% of what you need or what you want. That must be such either a disheartening thing, or it's just a waste of their time, because they're like, well, I'm not going to get involved when I'm as busy as I am. I'm a professor at whatever university, and you're also asking me to do this. Then no, I can't do off ifs, buts, and maybes. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. And again, for me, it reeks that to that whole thing of this hearing will only prove useful if there's an impact from it down the line. And I feel we're not going to get that until into 2025 if we get a follow-up next year as to have we got more academic support, has that declassification workshop stuff kicked off, that there has been more declassifications that should then hopefully come to the public as well. Do you have more universities getting involved? Have we had more follow-up on the report? Have we seen more video evidence? Have we had the debunks firmly, affirmed that this is what it was and why? People being able to access that data online, Dan, you talk about, to look at the working, all of that for me would then look back on this to say, okay, something came of that and AARO kicked on. If in a year's time, and this might sound like I'm going to repeat myself when we talk about the next hearing, that nothing's come of it, then that's a bit of a damp squib, and it's just resetting every single year to the same point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There was a little bit here about public submissions, because they spoke about sensor bias, right? And they're deploying their Gremlin system, which is in areas where UAP are cited, and they can he said they're trying to kind of find what a normal baseline is for activity, and then they can compare it better to the anomalous stuff. But he went into saying the system they have for submissions, they're going to open to the public next year. That's really great. That's a good forward step. They're going to need more than like 5 to 10 people working in AARO once the public starts submitting things. I was also a bit perturbed by the fact that they said, oh yeah, we've been looking at like cell phone apps and stuff in ways that people can submit these things, but we've decided that it's safer and cheaper for people to download a PDF and email it with imagery and video. Which is it safer to do that? I'm not sure it is. And how many people are going to be inclined to download a PDF, fill it out with printing as an intermediary step there maybe, and then submit it? That's friction there. You want to make it as easy as possible. You want something that looks like, the Enigma app. I know there are problems around their privacy and government kind of ties there, but the government are clearly not using this app because they've decided that PDFs are better. So yeah, that was a little weird. Good that they're opening it to the public. Bad that there's such a process full of friction that will probably make people go to the AARO website and go, nah, and just sack it off, even reporting it,
Yeah. I kind of gave you my closing statement just before, Dan, so I don't have a whole lot left to say on this particular hearing, if you want to kind of wrap up on it.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add is that this morning, Senator Gillibrand announced that she was giving the
Askapol.
Bringing out, from Askapol. Props to Madam Aslow.
Just opened it up, yep.
Yeah, Senator Gillibrand brought out a bill that gives the Pentagon authority to shoot down UAPs and drones on US soil. She says, an object that doesn't do anything, it's not showing hostile intent, but it's a huge national security breach. And so we want to update the law to say that this is a huge national security breach, and we may take them down on that basis alone. This is really talking about the Langley kind of incidents that have been going on, where there have been quadcopters and things like that sighted over Langley for hours, just flying over sensitive facilities that they want to take out. What worries me in this is that she's saying, yeah, shoot at any potential anomalous stuff that kind of comes along. Like, don't shoot alien craft. Like, imagine, Urkel comes down and he wants to make peace with us, and he's there kind of like, I bring peace and love, and then we're just firing missiles at him. Like, it's not a good first step.
I'm willing to put wave after wave of my men at your disposal. You suck. Yeah.
That's your drama.
Yeah. But yeah, so again, Dan, for me, it was the lesser of the two hearings. When I spoke to Tim Burchett, he quite honestly said, after the first hearing we're about to talk about, that people like himself don't have the power or influence to really get the information they need. George Knapp and others have said the same. Brian Bender, when I spoke to him, that interview is not out yet, but will be next week, he said the same thing, that it really has to be Senate level and above to really have the big guns, pardon the pun, to pull progress into this topic from a political point of view. And it seems like it's still relatively light-hearted what's happening here.
Yeah.
In terms of them kind of kicking down the doors. If for me, Dan, next year we get a follow-up in 12 months' time, and it's Gillibrand, Ernst, and whoever else sitting there, and it's Kozlowski, and we're in the same place again, then I think you can kind of close the door on AARO completely. I think you probably have to say 12 months to see what he does in this office. But
Yeah.
again, in 12 months' time, if he's gone, we've got someone else in and we're having the same conversation, and it's AARO and it's another director, and they're still looking to declassify, then I think you have to look elsewhere. Not that I'm expecting anything to come from there anyway, but I know some folks maybe still are holding on to maybe AARO can do something. I'm on the, if my energy bar for AARO and AARO optimism was like 100 to 0, I think it was already down at like 10 or 5 anyway. It's probably hovering still about 5. I don't think it's moved up at all. So my bar's almost empty for AARO optimism.
So rating this hearing, what, you'd like two UFOs out of 10 for this one?
Yeah, probably. I was going to try and say no 3, but probably 2. I think 3 would be too much.
Just low energy. I was disappointed that there weren't more people engaged, especially after the one we're about to talk about. And yeah, I want to see more. I want to see action. I want to see change. 12 months before I just start railing against them. They will know I hit them with a low number of Twitter followers.
Dan, for some folks, this will be the end of part 1 / our toilet break, because I feel we're going to go long, given that's been an hour. So thanks if you've listened this far. If you're on the paid feed, you'll hear the full thing all the way through. God bless you for listening that long. God help you. But yeah, otherwise, speak to you soon. Dan, I will see you in just a moment.
See you in a moment.
Hi, folks. Some of you may be joining us for part 2. Some of you may be carrying on from the first part because you're on the paid platforms. Well done to you either way. Dan is still with me. We are looking at the other hearing now, Dan, in this second part, and I've got some listener questions to finish off with. We are going to go through the hearing that was from November 13th, 2024. 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. This was held by the Committee on Oversight and Accountability, co-chaired by Representative Nancy Mace and Representative Glenn Grothman. So we're going backwards on this one. And Dan, you've just made the point. I'll let you do it because you made it. So
yeah, we were just chatting before we hit unpause there, and we were talking about the fact that with the previous hearing with AARO, I'd watched it live and got annoyed about it. And then in hindsight, it's a bit more neutral. And he didn't watch it live, but it's very neutral after watching it this morning. Whereas with this one that we're about to discuss, I didn't watch it live and feel that the people who did watch it live got really annoyed. They were really invested in it. Whereas, yeah, it was about a week before I could sit down and watch it, and I was a bit more kind of positive on it. So I was just saying that my lesson is don't watch these things live. And you made a really good football analogy.
Yeah, just making the point that when you watch a game in real time and it's your team and you're invested, that you can be more negative and worried that 1-0 the other team are going to score and it wasn't good enough, even when you win. Yet if you watch it back the following day, actually that 1-0 that ended up 2-0, you bossed it, your defence was never under pressure and everything else. But I would say, Dan, on this occasion, some of the defendants or witnesses were under a bit of pressure at times, and maybe didn't necessarily perform as well as they could have. Huh? We
Yeah.
shall see. Dan, a couple of live notes though. When I started watching it on YouTube, there were over 30,000 people when Nancy Mace started talking. So I think that's really good numbers. I'm sure going back to the hearing last year, or even the one before that with Moultrie and Bray, there was like
Mhm.
5,000 or something. I might be misremembering, but I'm sure there was like a tenth of what there
Yeah.
was this time.
And the one last night, I was watching the ABC news feed. For everyone that says mainstream media doesn't cover this, they did. It was live streamed on ABC, on YouTube at least, and the maximum I saw during that was about 10,000 people. So
Okay.
very different night and day hearings here,
Yeah.
especially with the attendance in the room as well. This one was overflowing with people and
Yeah.
senators and interest, whereas yeah, the other one just had like 2 people and a few people scattered about on chairs and stuff like that.
A few folks had messaged me to say as well that apparently on Twitter or X, the feed had over 300,000 people watching it on there at the
Wow.
time. So this was kind of well watched, which may be a good thing, maybe a bad thing. Do you know what? Actually, no, it's a good thing ultimately, regardless of the kind of small imprint of the day, what may or may not have came of it. So again, Dan, I've got kind of chronological notes. So I'm just going to use the same ones I had last time from the actual hearing. Representative Nancy Mace kicked off the hearing, co-chaired with Mr. Grothman. We won't go through every single little word and phrase because it's been over a week now and it's
Can
been covered.
can we just, do you mind if I read Nancy Mace's opening statement? Because I felt in hindsight that was important, comparing, did this hearing fulfill what it was set out to do?
Go for it.
Nancy Mace's opening statement was, "This hearing is intended to help Congress and the American people to learn the extent of the programs and activities our government has engaged in with respect to UAPs and what knowledge it has yielded. That includes, of course, any knowledge of extraterrestrial life or technology of non-human origin. If government-funded research on UAPs has not yielded any useful knowledge, we need to know that too. Taxpayers deserve to know how much has been invested. They shouldn't be kept in the dark to spare Pentagon embarrassment. We will also hear from the witnesses today allegations of UAP-related misinformation and disinformation by government officials of which they are personally aware and directly experienced. And we will hear testimony today concerning recent revelations about a purportedly secret UAP program whose existence and findings may have been improperly withheld from Congress." So that's kind of the brief for what we're about to talk about. So in thinking of whether it's successful or not, this is what we're comparing against.
Early on, Nancy Mace was probably the star of the hearing, Dan. This was my
Yeah.
reaction at the time. I don't think that's changed since, even though we'll get to a couple of things. She was really good, like you mentioned, talked about Nell, HR McMaster, kind of finger on the pulse opening statement, wasn't it? It was pretty good, some of the comments she was making. Buzzwords were in there, extraterrestrial, hearing that early on. I felt Nancy Mace, Anna Polina Luna. I like the guy Frost. Is it Maxwell Frost? Max Frost. He was decent.
Good
There were,
superior name.
yeah, very good. There were some Frost folks. That's like Swifties for Max Frost folks. There were some folks who had done their homework, who were well prepared, who seemed to be interested and really want some answers here to questions I think a lot of the community, we'll call it, would have asked. And I think there were some congressmen and women who came in very underprepared or disinterested in the subject. So it was a pretty mixed bag in that respect.
Or swing in with wild conspiracy theories in one case.
Yeah. She's slated. I don't know if you mentioned this, Dan, in the opening statement or not. Being it a week ago, it might not have been opening statement. She slated AARO and disturbed at its lack of transparency, with even a lack of knowing what its budget is. She made a good point there, and I think it's fair to say she's talking about AARO as an entity that has been under Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, I think
Yes.
Kozlowski's very much in the infancy of his time taking it over.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to something, for me at least, I almost want these same people to be grilling AARO, just so we have some kind of continuation. So when Nancy Mace there is saying, like, we don't even know your budget, what's your budget? I want her to be able to ask John Kozlowski about that. Versus just, it almost felt like the two hearings were completely separated and not informed by each other. And it would be great if they could be informed by each other.
Is this not a microcosm of the whole UFO topic politically, though, Dan?
Pretty much.
Is that not the problem? Everything's so compartmentalized. No doubt Congress are sitting. I'm just presuming they're going, Senate don't know what they're talking about. The Senate will be going, Congress don't know what they're talking about. All these different departments are being asked stuff from Congress, stuff from the Senate, stuff from military organizations, Air Force, Navy coming out and asking them questions, asking for information. And it's just easy to swat all this stuff away because there's just so much constantly.
Yeah. I mean, this is what unions are for, right? With jobs, is instead of having like 500 people go into the boss with all these different concerns and not consistent messaging, you talk to one representative that deals with the boss, and the messaging is, concise and agreed upon. Something like that needs to happen here, I think.
So realistically then, Dan, can you get progress on the UFO topic politically? Because I know you're saying something like that needs to happen. Something like that won't happen, though. And I think
might not. The only reason I say might is only because however you feel about the election, Trump is going to be the next US president. And the Republicans have won the House and the Senate. So here we have a possibility that maybe all of these disparate pieces can now work together and push in the same direction. Remains to be seen, though.
Right. Disclaimer here, folks, right? I got loads of emails off various folks over the last week or two whenever I've mentioned Trump with guests, blah, blah, blah. I don't care if you're pro-Trump, anti-Trump, in the middle, and everything else. I've had emails on every side. Only had one person so far. I think I told Dan, tell me they're not listening to the podcast again because Tim Burchett was on, right? We're talking about UFO stuff. We are going to have to bring up Trump, whether you like him or not. And we're going to have to bring up Democrats, Republicans, and all that stuff. And for the record, I have invited several Democrats onto the podcast, and I've not had a response yet from any of them. None of these people owe me anything to come on. So if it's Burleson and Burchett coming on the podcast, those are the ones who have responded and offered to give me their time. Thanks. I've reached out to the others and have chased up again. So this isn't anything to do with politics. I appreciate Trump is incredibly divisive, whether you're a big fan of his or not. I'm not in the US. It'll affect everyone worldwide when he's back in. But it is what it is. He has to be mentioned. He's the president. Same thing with Biden. Same thing with Obama. And it'll be the same after Trump as well. So he's going to get mentioned, folks. So if it's a trigger warning, then turn off because it's politics. And unfortunately, you have to kind of talk about the US presidents, our presidents-elect, as they are when you're talking about it. So just a thing there. But thank you for sticking with us. And not being US citizens, we're not going to tell you what to think about your president incoming or not, or who you've got. Is what it is. Don't particularly care for any of their politics regardless. So hey ho. We've got enough problems here in the UK, Dan.
God, yeah.
12-page report entered into Congress about Immaculate Constellation. Couldn't talk about this at the time, but it was entered into the record by Mace. 12-page report. She thanked Schellenberger for bringing it along, who was one of the witnesses, Dan. We found out pretty quickly afterwards that only 11 of the pages had been submitted, and that it wasn't Schellenberger that brought that document along. It was actually Jeremy Corbell. Now, regardless what people want to say about it, because I saw some comments online about Jeremy Corbell just wanting credit, etc., he should have had the credit. Schellenberger and Mace should have mentioned it was Corbell that brought it along. Schellenberger should have corrected her to say, I am not giving you that document. It was someone else. And all 12 of the pages also should have been submitted, not 11. I don't care if one of them was a blank page with an asterisk at the bottom to say, please submit this 12th page. If you're talking about transparency in this subject, you're only going to fuel more conspiracy by doing things like that, by not giving the right credit to the right people, by not correcting things, and by not giving us the full document. I don't think it's again, given what we're talking about, Dan, if you're having something submitted into public record, they shouldn't be holding back anything at all which is being submitted, because that flies in the face of the point of this, doesn't it?
Yeah, I completely agree. There is a point in the hearing where Tim Burchett gives Corbell credit, but
He
it's
does.
such a small line.
Yeah.
And the concern is, when you read the document, it says this is a Pentagon document and this is a public version. And, there are a few things in there that have people questioning whether this document has been misrepresented. Before you even get to reading the text of it, it's already been misrepresented by saying that it was given by Schallenberger or that it was provided by Congress. Exactly like you said, if we're going to be transparent, we have to be transparent. I don't know why they would have removed that front page and not given Jeremy, the nod for submitting that. It was certainly, for me, the kind of surprise of the hearing. I didn't expect to have that document available to read after this hearing. I thought they were just going to talk about it. It was really great that we do get to read it. And, for everything that people say about Jeremy, he's the one that provided transparency there. He's the one that got it out to us. So, thank you. Now we're informed more about it.
It also does lean, for me, I lean towards that being deliberate, that he wasn't credited with bringing that along.
And it raises questions, right?
Yeah. And that then starts to, as much as I'm saying Mace was the kind of star of the day, you look and go, why did Mace and Schellenberger not correct that to say the document was brought in? And she could have done it afterwards online. That for me just raises questions, and it does, and it's something we're going to come to. One person makes one mistake, it does, whether you like it or not, bring into question other aspects of what they've said. So within the contents of that hearing, you do have to then look at it with a slightly different veil. I'm not sure. That can be fair or unfair, but it does slightly taint it. If you make 100 cakes, Dan, and one of those cakes is really shit, and you've accidentally, I don't know, pissed in it. I don't know if I
accidentally.
Yeah, the other 99 cakes might be incredible, but other people are going to look at their cakes and go, "Did they piss in my cake too?" Don't know.
I mean, this is the problem we have with.
Sorry,
AARO.
That's a new phrase, Dan. Don't piss in my cake.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but you get the gist of it. Yeah.
But that is a good example of what has happened with AARO, right? They came out, we gave them, benefit of the doubt. They did a bad job. They've been pushing kind of stigma out there and kind of growing the stigma in the way they've conducted themselves. And now we're being asked to give them a second chance. We're going, well, for the past year, like a lot of the people that were there under Kirkpatrick are still there. So why should we expect a change here? And I think it's fair,
Dan, can I give you a really up-to-date and relevant story, which is exactly the same thing?
Go on.
My wife was telling me today in the car, one of her friends on Facebook had posted about this doggy daycare place locally to us, and it's been shut down because someone sent their dog in for doggy daycare to be looked after while they were working. The dog's ended up being attacked and losing its eye because the people who own the doggy daycare just employed some random staff not qualified to look after dogs.
Oh, no.
They scatter fed the dogs. So what they done was, all the dogs in the same room on the floor, they threw all the food on the floor, from which loads of these bigger dogs then went for the smaller dog who was just nibbling away at whatever it was. So they've been shut down, but they're now trying to open up under a different guise with different staff. So are you sending your dog to that doggy daycare?
No, I'm not.
Staff, though.
But it's fair. This is a good comparison.
So they're always going to be tainted. So yeah, that's
AARO is like a shitty doggy daycare right now.
Yes, absolutely, like a really shit doggy daycare. Not saying they've attacked any animals at all. That's not something I'm throwing at them. May have tried to disgrace some former officials, but hey ho, who knows? Allegedly. Representative Robert Garcia, Dan, gets passed to, and he has a chat. He mentions a previous hearing, getting the ball rolling to this time, mentions UAP in our airspace and oceans. I like to hear that. This is about truth and science and facts, and I like that. Great point. We don't need to run to exotic claims just yet. It's trying to remain balanced on kind of both sides really helps. What's additional public hearings, a topic that needs to carry on through this Congress. So, like we said, folks, you've got another 4-year term starting here with new individuals. I won't pretend to know them all through different important positions. The
Well, we
UFO
have
UAP topic is there.
off the top of my head, I know no one's confirmed yet, but so John Radcliffe, who is former
Yeah.
DNI, he's been very favorable to the UFO
Yeah.
issue, going on mainstream news and saying there are things that they don't understand them and that it seems to be more anomalous than the US would like to admit. He's going to be heading up the CIA, if I'm not incorrect. And also Marco Rubio, who's been a big proponent of the UAP issue, initially publicly, but now we hear that behind closed doors, he's someone that pushes it. He's going to be in a very important cabinet position, I think Secretary of State. Again, whether all these people get confirmed in these roles is ahead of us, but we're going to have some really interesting people who support UAP transparency in really big positions in the coming administration. So now's the time, if they wanted to get this out.
Well, they've just confirmed the transport head, Dan. It's Bob Lazar. So that is not
Ever
true.
sport model for you.
Can you imagine? That would be it. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Nice to hear. Has to run through. Then Glenn Grothman speaks. He's wary of the drone swarms flying over Langley Air Force Base. He's discusses whether these phenomena are the result of foreign adversaries or something else. We need to take them seriously, and I don't mind any of the politicians involved in this coming out with that line of questioning. I'm happy, Dan, if newsreaders and journalists and public figures would take that line with it. Look, we're not saying it's alien. I don't particularly care. I don't even believe it's alien, but we don't know what this is. And if it is foreign adversaries, we need to deal with it. If it's something else, we need to deal with it. And you can take it from there, because the conversation still ends up in the same place anyway.
And that's really been the whole position of, what we call UFO Twitter. And since 2017, since that kind of got rolling, is like, look, there's something there. You need to deal with it. It doesn't matter what you think it is, you need to deal with it. And yeah, it's great to see senators getting to that point. Grothman also said something that I know has been picked apart. He said no agencies have been able to verify Grush's claims since the last hearing. That phrase, the phrasing around there is interesting. I've seen debunkers kind of run with it as, well, then Grush is all BS. I've seen people who, were fully in on what everything that Grush brought to the table, use it in other ways. But I think we can all agree that when someone's saying that no agencies that have been tasked to look have found anything, these agencies are the same agencies that no one has trusted in the first place. That Kirkpatrick went to and said, hey, have you got any of that UFO secret stuff? And they just went, no. And he went, okay, cool, and left them alone. So I don't think that's damning in the way that it's being presented as. But it also isn't great in terms of, you were talking earlier about, you want to see action from these hearings over the next, year or so. And in terms of Congress, in terms of the House and pushing for more information, it's clear that they just haven't been able to get anywhere with Grush's claims. Grush hasn't been in a skiff with them, despite testifying for 11 hours to the various subcommittees. The people in the House don't seem to have the muscle to push for these answers.
Sorry to folks on YouTube, I'm just adjusting the hot water bottle behind my
Yeah,
back.
it does look like you have a wedgie.
Yeah, the audio folks won't hear it, but I'm surrounded by hot water bottles. It's very cold where I am, and I'm still recovering from illness. But anyway, enough about that. On that, Dan, so that's worth talking about. I spoke to Tim Burchett the day after the hearing, and I asked about one of my big disappointments, and I think we talked about this in the preview, would be that I would like to hear in this hearing there was progress made from the previous hearing, going back almost 18 months, from what David Grush and Graves and Fravor said, particularly Grush. And there has been zero progress made that we know of now publicly. They can't get Grush into a skiff, speaking to various individuals and officials and journalists. A lot of that apparently is down to the level of congressmen and women asking for those. And that will be knocked back because of their level of power and influence. Potentially, you would need senators to do that. So, not to say he hasn't been in skiffs with some folks, but he hasn't been with the folks who want him in skiffs, or the ones that are talking publicly anyway. And maybe that's the issue, that Luna, Burchett, Burleson, Garcia, these folks who want that maybe aren't getting or have the pull, it sounds like, to get these skiffs to happen. I don't know. That's a big disappointment for me. That, and we talked about this at the time when Grush had that hearing, Dan, that the impact from that would be important. So if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, does a tree fall at all? So was it worth Grush even saying what he said?
I like it. You get into holographic universe theory with that analogy there.
I know,
but
you know what? And
it's apt.
Of course, it was relevant, but I mean, in the grander scheme of things, it either, and I maybe said this at the time, Dan, becomes another Bob Lazar-esque story, or it becomes something that bears fruit. And right now, it's still an anecdote and a story that will go down in UFO lore because they've been blocked at every turn trying to see progress from it. And Grush, as I asked George Knapp about, has been laying low. So we're kind of where we are at the minute with that. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, it's frustrating. I'd like to see more action on it too. And yeah, we did talk about it. We want to see these things have an effect on each other. It's great having all these hearings, but they have to snowball. Otherwise, you've just got separate tiny snowballs. You want it to grow to something bigger. Grush has been, we've been waiting a year now since we were told there would be an op-ed. Then everything with the Intercept happened, where Grush was attacked for his PTSD, which was, shameful and a really good example of the kind of muckery that goes on with the US government, given that the journalist was tipped off by an intelligence community contact to find that information. There is a lawsuit ongoing for that, where David Grush is suing the sheriff's department. Not sure where that'll go. There's an argument to be made that the sheriff's department were just doing what they told and they're employees of the federal government and so on and so forth. So we'll see where that goes. It's an interesting one, but it's a very public retaliations example of what happens when these whistleblowers come forward. Whether you believe Grush or not, this happened. There's a lawsuit over it. So we'll have to see where it goes. But yeah, I was disappointed that it wasn't kind of followed up with here. And it's frustrating that these people don't have the access that they need. But I also do wonder, does it matter in the sense that, earlier or on part one, in talking about the other hearings, we were talking about the Gang of Eight and the access that they have, and that we're never really going to hear what they have seen and know. They're only going to give us these little bits. It's not full open disclosure. It's like semi-disclosure, technically. What is our need to know for Grush being confirmed, or Grush's claims being confirmed, when the whole point of these things is that Congress is angry that they aren't able to exercise their constitutional right to know everything that's going on? Maybe they have been privy to this stuff. Maybe they have found more, but they're just not telling us about it because we don't have a need to know.
A little hat tip to Need to Know with Ross Coulthard
Yes.
and Bryce Nagel there. The Gang of Eight stuff, what you're kind of getting at there then is that they can make that burger we talked about in part one, right? Because they can go around KFC, McDonald's, Burger King, Subway, Hungry Jack's, all that, and get all the best bits. But we're not going to see that. What we might get, though, say if we do get that burger, you're happy at that point, but you're never going to find out the recipe. They're going to have to keep that to themselves. But
Yeah.
what if we get something like that burger? I think most people are happy.
Yeah, it depends. It all comes down to that conversation we always have of what disclosure means to different people.
Or tastes like.
Yeah. And it's subjective, right? Just like that burger. Some people are going to say, yeah, that tastes exactly like the one that you were meant to give us. And other people are going to go, ugh, that's horrible. Unless we have the recipe and I can make it home myself with pure ingredients and so on and so forth, then it doesn't count for anything. It's subjective. And that's what's so difficult about this. It's not a defined term. As I said, Lou Elizondo in this hearing says UAPs are real. John Kozlowski in his press roundtable, the government representative, said UAPs are real. For some people, that meets the bar, and they'll take that yes for an answer. For other people, it's not good enough.
still sidebarring before we move on, how do you feel? And I've kind of asked you this before, but I suppose now we know that one, Grush hasn't been in a skiff as far as we know. And two, George Knapp said that Grush's op-ed was written a long time ago and is just sitting. With that in mind, if the next thing we hear from David Grush is that he has a book deal and he's writing a book, how does that make you feel about the David Grush story?
No, different, I suppose. Like, I get that some people will kind of go, oh, he's just taking the money and so on and so forth. And yeah, that's fine. But at the same time, I would prefer a more in-depth thing that, a book would represent versus, they're never going to publish a book length thing as an op-ed. They're just two completely different mediums. And the book will be more accessible to more people and won't just be for the UFO community. So I think there are pros and cons to each. Personally, I'd love to read Dave's book and learn more about it. But it's very obvious that Luna doesn't want to read any books at all.
Yeah, we'll get to that. And folks, I'm not suggesting or hinting that I know David Grush has written a book. I've just, Dan, as you'll know, thought for a while that maybe
Yes.
it's going to go that way if Lou Elizondo's books come out and Jay Stratton has a book deal. There's clearly a market there for it. And if you were people in these arenas, I'm sure if you are Dan Farah and the company arranging all that stuff, you would be saying to Elizondo and Stratton, can you get me Grush? I want to speak to Grush because that's a movie, that's a TV series, that's a book.
Yeah.
And that's a name that is far better known to the public than Lou Elizondo or Jay Stratton.
Yeah,
Because he went
absolutely.
international.
I just want to touch on the names of the Gang of Eight. I know I've done it before, but some people might not have heard this. But there are some interesting names here. So we have Mike Turner, Jim Himes, Mark Warner, Marco Rubio, Mike Johnson, Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, and Mitch McConnell. Several of those names have been very big on the UAP issue, with Chuck Schumer even pressing Senate, doing a full kind of speech on the benefit of the UAP Disclosure Act. Seeing the Gang of Eight push in this way for things like review panels and transparency and talk about things like biologics and recovered craft, it certainly suggests to me that maybe they do know more than what we think they do. Maybe they have spoken to Grush in a skiff, as we've kind of been told that he spoke to the the committees and things like that. So yeah, it's watch all of these people's actions, because as we always say, actions speak louder than words. So these are the people to watch.
Representative Jared Moskowitz comes up next. He said there's been a void of information over the decades that has allowed theories to grow and fester. Not an unfair comment, like that is
Yep.
just true. Many of us were told not to ask some of you certain questions on certain topics, and that was him addressing the witnesses who, by the way, folks, chronologically, if you haven't seen the hearings, you haven't even seen the witnesses at this point yet still. So myself and Dan haven't left them out, even though we've mentioned them by name. They're still
not to say that they're like behind a wall or have bags over their heads or something. They're in the room, everyone can see them, but yeah, they've just not been addressed yet.
Some people would say they might as well have had bags over their heads or been in a different room. Just opinions. At that point, Nancy Mace enters the 12-page Immaculate Constellation document into Congress. Let me correct that, Dan, the 11-page document. I did like at the time particularly that she mentioned the whole, and this is what we talked about, Dan, with the Senate maybe not using open language or the language we would like in the newest hearing. She basically comes out and says, very community style, I've heard that if you mention Immaculate Constellation, you end up on a list. Well, I don't mind being put on a list by any agency, so come at me, bro. And I know some folks are like, politicians shouldn't talk like that. It's 2024. We're well past what a politician should talk like, folks. Come on.
Yes. Yeah, we are. And interestingly, on the other side of that coin, so Lou Elizondo did a Q&A on his YouTube after this hearing. He refused to say the words Immaculate Constellation. He said a 2-letter word beginning with I, which is interesting, right? Given that Lou says during this hearing that he was made to sign a document where he wouldn't talk about things like crash retrievals and things like that. So either Lou is very skittish on the document and is just playing safe and just doesn't want anything, to kind of muddy the water there for him or come back on him, or maybe he's a person that had a hand in kind of making Immaculate Constellation. It is said to have been made after 2017, and who better than the guy who ran the ATIP effort?
Or 3 is playing up to it.
One of the three, yeah. It's like I
Not
said
saying,
earlier,
but
it's
that does
this.
cover the bases.
You've got to kind of hold all these possibilities, and people will hear those and they will instantly go to one of the three. Don't hold all three as possibles in your mind. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Just hold all three as possibles, and yeah, just as we go forward, just examine them on an ongoing basis.
Another quick sidebar, Dan. I do think we're at a point. Well, I can't speak for anyone except myself, right? Where the topic and politically this kind of setting with these players, these names, these organizations, the groups we know of, OSAP, ATIP, Immaculate Constellation, if you're looking at Corbell, Nat, Burchett, Luna, Elizondo, Mellon, Nolan, that cast of characters from the last 7 years, it's, for me, the most confusing time of where everyone sits in these hierarchies and who's helping, who's not helping, who's embellished, who hasn't embellished, who's trying to make a name for themselves, who's really doing hard work. And there's so much up in the air. And then again, with the rumors of what's going to come down the line from other people, other books, Grush being a bit of a non-playable character at the moment. You know, he's kind of an unlockable character, but we don't know how to unlock him. There's a lot just kind of up in the air with the whole scene that very quickly could fall into place or very quickly could fall to shit. And that's just where I'm at personally when I see all this stuff now. It's like I've got, you know, the Charlie Day from Always Sunny where he's got all the shit on the wall.
With all the like
Yeah.
lines
I
between it.
feel
Of
I now have
conspiracy theory
so
and
many
everything.
lines, yep, going across so many pictures. I get when people are like, fucking hell, there's so much going on. And if you do take a break from this for a few weeks, you do come back and go, what have I missed? Jesus, because that much
Yeah.
is happening. It's really
It
interesting,
took me
but it's heavy.
So the hearings happened, and my fiance was visiting. You know, we had a wonderful time. But I just kind of tapped out at things. You know, I didn't even watch the hearings live. It took me 3 days, 3 full days of watching YouTube videos, looking at news articles, watching that hearing, just to catch up. And
And I
it
didn't
just kind of
know.
speaks to it.
I didn't know Lou had done a Q&A till you just said.
There you go. See, it's
I had
hard to
zero
keep up with
idea.
everything. Add a little line to your wall.
Yeah, I try and retweet loads of stuff so people can go, and it's not an endorsement normally, but I will retweet stuff so people can go and look at it themselves, or opinion, or articles, or that kind of stuff. I generally hadn't seen it, didn't even know it was there. So yeah, it can be a lot, folks. But hopefully this kind of stuff helps you. At this point, Dan, Nancy Mace introduces the witnesses. So we have Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, who is there for the USO stuff. As we thought, Luis Elizondo, counterintelligence official, who we know from OSAP, ATIP time. He'll be the best known of the witnesses to anybody there. Michael Schellenberger, journalist, who was a bit of a latecomer to the game, but managed to get in there. And Mike Gold, who is a former NASA administrative assistant. He seemed, I think we talked in the preview, Dan, for me, he was like the wild card that we could really get something from a Mike Gold. At this point, let me just throw out to you, Dan, because you've not shared your thoughts on the podcast. Everyone's kind of heard mine and the other ones. Tim Gallaudet didn't really say much of anything, and it boiled down to he heard a story from something that happened in 1980, and he repeated the thing about his email being deleted. Lou Elizondo was...
I would say Gallaudet
through?
also kind of pushed on AARO a little bit about their attempts at changing his mind, which he sees as an influence operation being run on him, and wonders how many other people the AARO are running this on. That's something specifically I would have liked to see AARO asked about, in terms of how they phrase their questions, how they talk to witnesses, you know, things like that. Tim was real concerned about it, but yeah, I was afraid that this would be all he would bring. He had a lot of I can't speak to that and I don't knows, and when he was asked about USOs, he brought some case up from the 1980s that someone had told him about. Like, great, cool, talking about it, but it doesn't really move the needle along.
It was like putting a 4-team panel for a pub quiz together, Dan, and you've brought along a mate who is very good with 1970s rock, glam rock, okay? and that's a very small part of the quiz. And the rest of the quiz, he kind of sits there unable to give any answers, and the rest of us are like, "You?" And he's like, no, not my thing."
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Yeah, then we had Elizondo, who I thought his opening statement was really effective. It was concise. You know, he just spoke about the fact we're not alone in the cosmos. He said the US government are in possession of UAP tech. UAP are real. We need to take a safety first approach to this and stop the excessive secrecy. Spoke about Susan Goff kind of being a psychological officer who was a singular point of contact on the issue of UAP for the DoD, which is true. And I think Goff did herself no favors being sat behind John Kozlowski in the AARO hearing. Just feels a bit more like she's trying to influence things there, which just raises questions. Lou speaks to needing whistleblower protection, which, just to give him credit, Tim Burchett introduced some legislation just before this hearing happened that was designed to protect UAP whistleblowers, which is great. Good effort from him there. Lou also recommended that these committees wield subpoena power to get the right people in front of them. And I absolutely agree there. You know, I thought it was a good opening statement. Nothing huge like Grush, but I think for a member of the public who hasn't followed this along, doesn't really know Elizondo, maybe has read the book, or doesn't even know they released a book, in fact, I think they'd be, you know, big words. But again, we need to see that follow-up from Congress here.
See this subpoena? 2 seconds, because we'll take turns. Subpoena power thing. Someone commented online, and I can't remember who it was. It was somebody relatively informed, but they had made the point, and I don't know if this is true or not, that these committees can't have subpoena power. So
some of them don't, some do. It depends the power vested in them. So the Gang of Eight and some of the the Armed Services committees.
So I mean, like the higher up ones, yeah, but like a group of congressmen or a UAP caucus can't go requesting subpoena power.
Exactly. Right. They can kindly ask someone to come along. If they refuse, that's that. So mileage may vary. I'd love to see subpoenas happening, but also if they subpoena someone, you know, we've already heard from the Katsky and Colin Callagher that if they came in, they're not privy to divulge details, and people are allowed to lie under oath about classified programs anyway. So what use would it be? Not to say that they shouldn't. You need to get that stuff on record. But it's not going to be the be all and end all of that. Then we have Schellenberger, who talks about, elements of the IC and DoD being in violation of a law by not informing Congress, which is exactly true. It's Congress's constitutional right to be informed about these things. Different levels for different people, obviously, depending on their position. Said that the executive branch has been handling it without informing Congress, which is interesting because that the executive branch is the president, and we all know how timid they've been to approach this issue. Biden got tangled up in cables when he was asked about it and yelled, "Ask Obama," and ran off. Trump has just said that he's not necessarily a believer, which you would think that would kind of go the other way if he's been given full access. That's
what finds it interesting.
Yeah,
that's
a bit of a contradiction, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then you've got to think about, well, okay, if this is real and Elon Musk is now getting involved in government, what use is SpaceX if they have anti-gravity stuff? All that stuff kind of goes away then. But yeah, he spoke about Immaculate Constellation. That was the thing he brought. And he quoted John Greenwald, where John said that the DoD denies things on a Monday and then admits to them on a Friday, which is a really nice quote from there.
See, John just there. On that, you know, like you mentioned Elon Musk stuff, and if the US government's got anti-grav, do you not think it would be realistically the case is that say they brought Musk in and went, "We're going to show you some of the tech we've got," right? And they show him the craft from Roswell. Like, we'll go Independence Day style, right? They take him down to the bunker where they have like a couple of craft. And Musk is like, "Holy shit, you know, this is like, wow, like, I need to get my hands on this." And they're like, "Bring your scientists in. We can't figure it out. We don't have any more of them. There is literally these couple and some broken ones. So there is no mass production of them. There is no mass marketing. We can't do this. And we've had the best minds for decades on it. Not that more people and more resources wouldn't help, but there's a good chance that that may be the case, that the US government does indeed have a couple of them, or even let's go with Lazar's 9, but
9, yeah.
in various states of working and condition. But it might be that we literally have this one that we can even do anything with, and that's it. I think that's a quite likely scenario, as opposed to the US government having a fleet of Tic Tacs.
Yeah, and we hear this term, especially in the Immaculate Constellation documents, being thrown around of ARVs, or alien reproduction vehicles, where the craft isn't kind of a one-for-one copy. It's more of kind of a humanized version, but with certain things derived from it. So I'm just gonna, because in the Immaculate Constellation document they talk about arrowheads, which is what they call in Secret Machines as well. In those books. So I'm just going to kind of use that as a touchstone. In Secret Machines, you have these triangles that they built for human occupation. They have different modes depending on whether they're in, or different modes of propulsion depending on whether or not they're in atmosphere or vacuum or under the ocean. There's a different approach that we need to take to this kind of technology to make it suitable for us, because we are not the same species that made them. There's an aspect of these craft that are kind of supposedly telepathically or cognitively controlled via a neural interface. That kind of stuff is way, way advanced from where we are. Siri won't even get what I say to her correct. So, oh yeah, Siri's just activated there. Nice. But yeah, how the hell are we even going to start with a cognitive interface like that when we're only just kind of starting to scratch the surface of that kind of stuff? So when we're not going to be looking at something that's a 1-1 copy, maybe there are 1 or 2 people that can fly the original craft under the right conditions or something like that. But when it comes to the stuff that we're making that's derived from it, we probably understand 1% of it. And there might be something that's there, maybe Elon Musk saw, I don't know, the UFO that won't power off be caught by a tower instead of using manual landing, and he was like, oh, I'll have my rocket caught by a tower then. Yeah. It's going to be more stuff like that, more inspiration, as opposed to, yeah, let's just copy it 1-for-1, because we just wouldn't have the manufacturing techniques available to us, and maybe not even the elements.
SpaceX Tower Burger coming soon. I'll keep. I was going to ask you what you thought about each witness, but we'll keep that till the end. I think that probably makes more sense, doesn't it? Than going through it all. And you've just mentioned Mike Gold as well.
Oh yeah, Mike Gold. He didn't really go into, we expected him to talk about the Bigelow stuff and the materials being handed over from Lockheed and being blocked by the CIA. He didn't. He was there to kind of talk about how courage is needed to tackle this topic, and that he was there to speak for science, and reminded everyone that any scientists that wanted to engage in this were mocked and they were threatened, and the UAP NASA study team experienced that. He bigged up NASA's kind of role and what they could bring to the table in terms of UAP study, with vast archives of data, holding massive symposiums where they could just lift the stigma away from studying it, which I thought were very fair points. Spoke to how UAP-derived science could inform other sciences too, which I guess is what we just touched on with that kind of scenario with Musk and things like that. And just kind of said, what was the system? The ASRS is a system that NASA uses for pilots to kind of report things, that's already in place, and that they could use that system for people to report UAP sightings, the public to report UAP sightings, because it's trusted and it's well funded and it's there anyway, and they just need to tweak it a tiny bit. So he wasn't as big as some people thought he was just there asking for money for NASA. He wasn't really. He was there to basically preach what science could bring to the table if it was engaged properly and fully on this issue, and I thought he did a good job. His last line from his statement was, "The truth is out there. We need to be bold enough and brave enough," which can't fault that, right?
No, not at all. Coming soon on one of Dan's t-shirts, or Nancy Macy's, who knows? So Nancy Mace starts asking questions. So she's got her 5 minutes, and how it works, folks, a reminder is they each get 5 minutes to go round and ask a series of questions. And once your time's up, your time's up. Strange way of this working, but this is how they seem to work these things. So
I guess they'd be putting their hands up and just waiting for someone to
just that whole 5 minutes though, and then if someone's got a really good question, it is like a game show where it's like, oh, I've run out of time. It's
Yeah,
like, well,
right.
no, you can ask a really good question, and it's like, you
The
can't answer it.
crafter housed in. Oh, I'm sorry, I ran out of
Yeah,
time.
really sorry. We're out of time. Yeah, that's it. Really quickly, because I don't want to go over every question again. We'll ask Dan some highlights because I've gone through all mine before. I thought Mace's questions were really good. She gets Gallaudet to talk about shapes of UAP being a button or saucer. She asks Lou Elizondo who's making UAP, and she really pushes back on his answers. Lou did try to talk around some of the questions at times, but certain of the folks there, and this isn't a dig at Lou, the other ones couldn't really answer any questions in an informative or reasonable way. So it seemed like any decent question had to be directed at Lou. And I feel if
Yeah.
there were 4 other witnesses of a similar stature, it would have been a fairer spread. And it just seemed to be that anything you're going to get here of any real relevance or use, or maybe just the way that it was asked, I feel some of the witnesses were either wasted by Congress or they were just the wrong witnesses to have there in the first place. So
Yeah,
that's
and
my point on the pushback with Lou's answers.
I think we can bring that around to we expressed concern as to why Schallenberger was there, right? You know, great that he has these documents. This is what he's bringing to the table. He didn't even submit the documents. He essentially was there to say, I got told X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Cobell submitted the documents. Once again, thank you to Cobell for doing that. So whenever anything was asked to Schallenberger just kept referring to this document. So I didn't really understand why he was there. When you look at someone like Cobell, whatever you think of what Cobell's released, it's clear that there are people out there that give him stuff, that send him videos, that send him reports, both him and Knapp, and they pass those on to us or they investigate them themselves. I think someone like Cobell would have been a much richer witness to have there, who could have
Then
spoken about
Schellenberger.
so many different cases and so much activity and so much kind of, you know, government blocking and things like that on the issue, as opposed to someone that just said, read the document that he didn't even give her.
Yeah, I don't think that's unfair at all. And listen, I'll be really fair. You know, I like Jeremy. I would hope Jeremy would also be the type to say there are far better witnesses to be there than me, but
Sure.
I can sit there and be better than what you had. I think honestly, there at least was going to be Lou Elizondo plus 2, if not 3 other witnesses than those 3 that ended up with him. Maybe Gallaudet was going to be there and would have been disappointing anyway. But I think Schellenberger was probably a witness who was down the list and they've had to go for. Maybe Gold was the same at this point. I'm
Yeah, I
not
mean,
sure.
they asked. I know Vinny Adams of Disclosure Team did an interview with Avi Loeb, and Avi Loeb said that he was asked a few months back if he'd be willing to come testify. They didn't ask him to go, but I imagine it would have been quite similar to what Mike Gold is kind of presented
Yeah.
with, you know, a very science first foot there. So I understand that space, you know, that's actionable. That's stuff you can actually do after this hearing. But yeah, Schellenberger just referring to the document every time. You know, Lou expanded on things that were in his book, like we right about the time that we're talking, Lou says that the DoD gave Lou a document saying he can't talk about trash retrievals, and he had to sign that in a skiff, and the documents in a skiff, and he can show them it. And then I can't remember who said it, but they kind of laughed and said, "Well, you know, why you can't talk about Fight Club if there's no Fight Club?" Like,
Moskowitz.
yeah, Moskowitz, that was it. And everyone kind of laughed, and I think it was fair, you know, done through humor, but it was fair. Like, why are they telling you can't talk about crash retrievals if there are no crash retrievals?
Other than that comment with Moskowitz, Dan, the only real interesting thing that came out of his questions for me were Mike Gold saying he's in the Dan Farah documentary.
Oh yeah, which is
Um,
interesting. We've heard often about this, that there are going to be some new faces and big hitters in that documentary. I'm always wary of hype, big letdown. That's always how it goes. But I'm curious about it, and I look forward to watching it when it's released. But yeah, I won't give it much time in my head before I get to actually see the thing.
I'll just repeat my thing that no true disclosure is going to come from any documentary, folks. And I'm really looking forward to the James Fox documentary, the program. We'll remind you of that at the end again, folks. But no documentary, no huge piece of revelatory information is going to sit in a can for 6 to 9 months while it's edited. It's not going to wait on a TV show. It's not going to be published in a book. it will be 60 minutes mainstream news within 24 to 48 hours of it being presented
Yeah.
to said media organization. If someone came across a piece of information that was that explosive, they would be on live news talking about it. And I'm not saying there won't be really good stuff in documentaries, there won't be big puzzle pieces, but you're not going to get smoking gun stuff in any documentary. I don't care who's in it. It just
Yeah,
doesn't make any
I
sense.
agree. I totally agree. It's going to be more like, how Roswell happened. The story that went around the world first was the saucer was recovered and it was just
Yeah,
out there. Just get it out there. It wasn't, oh, let's hold on to this and
yeah,
well, put it in a documentary or a book or whatever.
100%. Grothman, I made one note. He asked Gallaudet why Congress can't have the Tic Tac info. Tim Gallaudet said there's no good reason not to show it regarding the data. That was it from Grothman. I didn't really get a lot from him.
Yeah, that was about it. He'd said earlier as well that he doesn't understand why anything older than 15 months was still seen as sensitive.
15 years.
15 years, sorry, yeah, not
Yeah.
15 months. That would be quite a short time.
Yeah.
15 years, which is a good point. We can show videos of Russian jets incurring into US airspace with stupidly high detail within an hour of them happening. But
Is that
this
what he says
stuff
about
you
Roswell? And
can't.
he basically goes, "Well, everyone's dead anyway." Like,
Yeah,
something like that. He says,
it's
"Yeah,
brutal, but
yeah."
also true, right?
Nothing we have not said, and others. I'm
No,
not saying it's like we came up with that, but
no, we
it,
did. We
it,
came up
it,
with it.
yeah, true, probably. But no, these folks have all passed away, and you're now onto the great grandkids of these folks who are like fourth hand witnesses because they heard a story from a story from a story. So yeah, and any folks in charge of those programs that would have the information weren't handed that information from the last guy that ran it. It's from the one before that, before that, before that, that have passed on to 7 different superiors down the line. So yeah, Tim Burchett, I felt he was a bit frustrated with the line of questioning. I he asked Lou about what David Grush had said, and Lou Elizondo kind of backs up that what David Grush's comments were.
Mhm.
He was one of the politicians I felt were frustrated. Probably could see the way things were going, the way things were being knocked back. Yeah, I got a sense of frustration from Tim Burchett and a few others.
Yeah, you can say what you want about Burchett. He clearly is furiously invested in knowing more and letting the public know more about this stuff. He's one of the first people to call out just the fuckery that goes on in DC and amongst politicians. No matter which country we're in, it just always seems to be the case.
Yeah.
They're out for themselves. So yeah, and this is where Tim thanked Corbell for submitting the documents. He didn't say the Immaculate Constellation documents; he just said the documents. So I get why people would have missed it. But yeah, it was a really kind of flyby comment. There was a portion of Lou Elizondo's Q&A on YouTube where he spoke about someone asked about the work he did with Dave Grush, and he went into a little bit, saying that he worked with Dave Grush at Space Force, and they worked together in a skiff on UAP related issues. He didn't give a time frame, so it didn't necessarily sound like it was all 2012. It could have been sooner. And Lou has spoken about working at doing stuff for Space Force in the last few years too. So yeah, very, very likely there that, or possible, I should say, possible, not very likely, that Lou and Dave have worked together really recently on these UAP issues.
Clay Higgins was up next. He's the representative for Louisiana. He asked questions around the report. I got the feeling he was a bit lost, a bit confused on what he was actually asking. Came across quite awkward. This was the first one I felt, you've not really done your homework on this. And if I'm wrong that he's trying his best, great. But this felt like he handed someone the book on the UFO topic, said, read this and give me the notes. They passed him the notes and he came in and read them on the day. That's the way Clay Higgins was presented to me. And from some of the emails I got from listeners, that doesn't sound too far from what probably happened.
Yeah, for sure. There is a very kind of apparent issue where people aren't being prepared enough to ask the really kind of deep cutting questions on this issue. And I think, that was my issue with Gillibrand. It just felt very skimmed over. And Ernst too, it's just like, I feel like you've kind of walked into the room after reading an AI summary of a book and you're
Yeah.
trying to get through a book report whilst not looking like a bullshitter. So yeah, when that finished and they were all like smiles and patting themselves on the back, it was like, no, you did not trick us. We all saw through that, you know?
Yeah. Then it was Max Frosted. Seems really young as well. He asks Mike Gold about Bill Nelson and NASA's part in the conversation. Gold said he believes NASA's got a trove of data that can inform the conversation, but NASA needs encouraged. I've seen a lot of folks, Dan, online saying that Gold came across as a NASA apologist. I can see why some people are saying that. I didn't pick that up myself. I felt he was maybe there trying to get folks he knows to get involved, and this is his way of trying to do it. He came across as like a lovely chap, like he'd be a good laugh at a Star Trek convention, I'm sure. But he said I like that he said NASA is intentionally or unintentionally transparent, as leaks happen anyway. I think he was kind of making the point they're a little bit incompetent in some ways, that if you think they're keeping this mega top secret, it would be a struggle for NASA to do that. So I understand where he's coming from.
Yeah. He said engineers and scientists love to talk. So yeah, it seems to be apparent. You know, if they got stuff to talk about, they will, and not everyone they talk to is going to be under oaths or NDAs and things like that. And really, you know, NASA, the UAP panel that they did was looking at how NASA would research UAP. It wasn't actually researching UAP.
Yeah.
So we've been waiting for that next step to come for them to actually say, hey, we're actually going to do a study of UAP. But so far, all they've been doing is they've been kind of liaising with AARO. And that's about it, because I guess they don't want to duplicate efforts and things like that. Personally, I want to see NASA do an independent study away from everything else. So Mike Gold's presence here, him kind of simping for NASA and saying, you know, essentially making the case like, yeah, let us do it. Let us study UAP. Like, come on. I agree with. Let him do it. Let's see what comes up.
Requires funding and people and money, which he did allude to the fact that is a struggle.
Yes,
to get that.
which is
It's
true.
not as easy. It's like going to a school where teachers are massively under pressure, I think, in any school, and giving them an additional project to do on top of their normal school working day, but saying they have to do it within the confines of the time they've got in school and during their normal day job as well. So I do get it still requires funding, money, budget, and it goes to a kind of point that was mentioned, Dan, about Frost mentions visiting facilities and hearing that private contractors rent hangars and the government don't know what's happening in these hangars. And then Gold makes a point about needing the right instruments for NASA to study the UAP topic. And he says, if we were studying black holes using pilots' cockpit cameras, we wouldn't know much about black holes. And
Yeah.
that's a pretty fair point to make.
Yeah, exactly. And on that front, it's encouraging to see AARO with their Gremlin system, that they're deploying that in more places over the next year, and going forward. Project Galileo is another one that are getting these sensor systems out that are specifically kind of tailored to look for UAP, amongst other things as well. And you know, all that data will be great, and they can give that off to people that study meteors and things like that. But yeah, we need sensors built specifically for this effort, and unfortunately, that does take money.
And we're not saying they don't probably have some of these already, folks. We're well aware of that, but it's how easy the access is to these, and even the existence of these sensors are known and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
totally got a base on the dark side of the moon, don't they, Dan? Yeah.
don't even get me started.
Okay. Why?
Why are we getting into the moon stuff now? The moon is weird.
You've got like 60 seconds. Tell me about the
60
moon.
seconds. So NASA crashed something into the moon and it rang like a bell, which was unexpected, and that maybe it's hollow. And a lot of theorists kind of went with the structures inside the moon. The moon also, the fact that it faces us the same way all the time is really strange. We've not really found another planet that has a moon like that. When people say the dark side of the moon, they mean the part facing away from us. It's not always dark. Sunlight lights it when it's around a certain side of our planet. We have mapped it. You can look at that map on Google Earth and stuff like that. Yes, they could remove stuff from it, but at the same time, nothing would be on the surface, right? It would be silly to put stuff on the surface, just like we're talking about on this planet. If there's something else here, it's hiding in lava tubes or it's in the oceans. It's not in such an obvious place. Was that in the 60 seconds?
Yeah, I'll give you that.
Right, cool.
The representative Anna Polina Luna, who's been a big UAP, UFO conversationalist over the last year or two, she came across really frustrated at what she was hearing from everyone. And I reckon it got to her and she was quite pissed off just the way she came across. She asked if any USOs have outpaced US submarines. Gallaudet said yes by some way. I think he says by magnitudes. She pushes Gallaudet about hotspots where UAP enter and exit the water, and he pushed that towards Lou Elizondo. She asked Lou about craft being piloted by non-human biologics. He agrees they are likely intelligently controlled as observed by their actions.
Which is an interesting response, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not saying there's a pilot in there. It's just saying it's intelligently controlled. And Mike Gold, even in another part of the hearing, talks about non-biological life. Not to say that he knows something, but he's clearly open to there being non-biological life that isn't just AI in the way that we're making it. So the fact that Lou kind of kept that broad and just said intelligently controlled, there's a lot of possibilities in there that don't include a little gray man sat in a control stick or, controlling it with his mind.
Yeah, she asks him to speak about these being interdimensional. He pushes back on that and says he tries to look at things scientifically. He mentions the speeds of these craft they're operating at are way beyond what we have or can do. She asks if they're alive. He says he can't say. She asked the panel if anyone has come across first-hand experience of these beings. The panel stay quiet. Lou says he was more nuts and bolts performance than that side of things, which was an interesting answer because I don't always think that's the impression he's given on interviews.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Or in other settings, but she came across the best prepared for this. She is clearly, I wouldn't be shocked if she had spoken to Lou Elizondo and or others in preparing those questions because she used her 5 minutes well. And I would have had multiple of those other congressmen and women have given their time over to her to ask more questions because she was good here.
Yeah, I agree with that. Luna came in prepared and ready to just throw those questions out
But
as well.
do you get the feeling she knows what she's talking about as well? She's not just asking a question. It's like she's got a reason for asking it.
Yes, completely. It's almost like someone has brought something to her and then she's asking about
Yeah.
that specific thing for a very specific reason. It's not just fishing like later on. I mean, maybe we'll skip over her, but Boibert, where she just brought up all this crap about hybrids and stuff. And it just felt like, oh, you're asking that because you saw it on YouTube or something. Like there was a drive there that wasn't there with anyone else. So yeah, props to Luna on that front.
Yeah. Garcia had his 5 minutes. He asks what he thinks they are. Gallaudet and Lou say non-human higher intelligence. Schellenberger doesn't know. Gold says he doesn't know but wants to find out. Probably says a lot about the witnesses in that little summary
Yeah,
there.
right.
Yeah. And he gets the witnesses, Gallaudet, to stress the importance of the UAP Disclosure Act passing. A little bit of a non-event 5 minutes. Andy Biggs asks some questions. I've got here that he asks why things are overclassified. Lou says that when this was first a reality to the US government, it was Cold War. The US government didn't want to show its hand as to what they knew, which is very fair. That just makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of answer that goes down well in these hearings from a public point of view, because that makes sense for a public going, well, why are they keeping it secret? Well, there's an answer. That's a good answer, well put in this setting.
And you've got to be mindful of this. I've said it before, the national security kind of angle. They're not going to want everything out. There's kind of a game being played with information that's being released between countries in terms of like trying to misdirect. But I do have to mention there that moment just took my mind flying back to the intro, I think it is, to Tom DeLonge's Secret Machines, where he says that the general that he spoke to started a story with, it was the Cold War and we found a body.
Yeah.
Cold War here again. A life form, that was it. Sorry, my bad. So
the only time I'll ever correct you on a Secret Machines book or probably.
So yeah, time frame is the same. Reasoning is the same here. Just one example of holding these possibilities in your mind and kind of going, it doesn't necessarily confirm it, but it certainly perked my ears up.
Yeah, this gave me the point, and I think I asked Knapp about this, Dan. If anyone sat in these hearings and gave a location and said, you remember, I think the big famous one from the last couple of years is Ross Coulthart saying he knows where a craft is that's so large they had to build over it.
Yes.
And if one of these locations was given out, what would stop, for example, China invading? Like, see, if it's technology
Yeah.
that's that secret, or if you were China and the US confirmed, okay, at Area 51, let's just go with the classic. At Area 51 in a hangar, and we do have a UFO. We do have an alien spacecraft. We believe it to be alien, and we're trying to look at the technology. Every single resource from a spying point of view or intelligence point of view of China, Russia, and other countries and private contractors around the globe would descend on those places,
Yeah.
and people inside would informants, all that kind of stuff, and
Well, it
bribery would
happened
go
with
through the
the
roof.
it happened with the Manhattan Project. There were scientists working on the Manhattan
Yeah,
Project who were double agents.
yeah,
And this is all kind of what led into the Cold War of keeping your secrets tight because you never know who's coming to kind of get them. What's interesting is that the US, kicked out a bunch of people that they thought were spies and then brought in actual goddamn Nazis to do this stuff. Not necessarily a solution, right? But yeah, it happens. It happens all the time. And it wouldn't necessarily be, an invasion, but if Ross put that location out there, or so in fact, let's even talk about what it actually is. Ross has said that he knows this. So there's
hmm
going to be a letter or a conversation, maybe a text message, maybe an email. Everyone who's interested in this technology and thinks that it can do good for their country would be trying to hack his email. They'd be trying to look at his letters. They'd be looking at his
yeah.
phone. They'd be, all these things. And they wouldn't necessarily lead to, SEAL Team 6 kind of going in there or the equivalents. But it sure as hell would lead to some people applying for jobs and trying to use cover to kind of get in there to get what they can find. I can't remember when it was, but there was one person who it's going to really bug me that I can't remember the name, but they literally stole like a whole safe of documents relating to the Manhattan Project, took pictures of them, and sent them off to Russia. And it's this kind of thing that's going to be happening. It's espionage.
Yeah.
It's not all sexy like Mission Impossible. Some of it's just boring taking pictures of documents, but it happens. It's real. So they have to be careful with this.
Representative Eric Burleson, formerly of this podcast, who I almost got cancelled because people thought he dressed like a Nazi,
Oh
but
yeah, with the armband on his arm,
it
but
was
it
a
was
sweater. Yeah, from
that's
some like
right.
sports committee, who then even commented on Twitter to say a design flaw on their part.
This is why you should always put stuff up to 1080p on YouTube, just to check before thinking about stuff like that.
100%. So he asked, does any aspect of the US government have technology? Lou brings up ATIP trying to get material. Burleson asks about material being blocked from coming into Lou's possession. Lou can't say where it would be in open discussion. He says in a skiff, he still could make the decision to convince Burleson by telling him who, where, or what. Lou says his focus was nuts and bolts, not biologics. Burleson does ask, has there been communication with non-human life forms? Lou says about crafts not communicating non-verbally in the way they act. I
Mhm.
felt his answer was a bit of a fob off, and I wasn't impressed with that answer.
He's spoken about this before, and I'm going to mention the whale thing again. So I interviewed Michelle Fournet, who looks at whale song, and when I did that, I fired a text off to Lou just saying, "Hey, is there anything you'd want to ask this expert on, marine biologics and acoustics?" And the question he asked was about how you would communicate non-verbally with the species who didn't have uh,
Yeah.
sound in a sound language. Sorry, I had a brain fart then. Language in the same way we have it, and like the answer was really interesting. But I've always thought that it was a really interesting question from Lou, just in the sense that it kind of tips to how do you communicate with something where you don't share a commonality to the point where even if you were to hold up a spoon, there are so many assumptions that go into why you call it a spoon, what you use it for, that it's not a weapon, and so on and so forth, that without that kind of shared knowledge base and shared ancestry, you can't even communicate what a damn spoon is. Um and it made me think of his analogy about the gorilla in the zoo,
hmm
and it's kind of playing with the lock, and then it gets out, and the zookeeper has a choice to make in that moment of whether to put the gorilla down, to tranquilize it, to just welcome it with open arms, and so on and so forth. um And I've always wondered, how would you, as the gorilla, communicate? Don't shoot me when you don't have that language. And I don't know, like making a monocle and top hat and pouring it on would probably, be a safe bet for them to go, this gorilla's not going to rip a bunch of children apart, versus angrily smashing the bars and throwing rocks and stuff like that. Makes me think of the end of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where they communicate with sound, light, and frequency. Hat tip to Russ and Bryce again. But yeah, here I would have liked to have seen that mentioned a bit more, because yeah, while it's non-verbal communication, if a plane flies too close to your plane and it's pushy, or you're walking down the street and someone like bumps you in the shoulder,
Hmm.
seemingly purposely, that's non-verbal communication. But I don't really feel like that's what the question was getting at, right?
Exactly. It wasn't what was being asked. And
Yeah.
Lou could have qualified that by saying, can you either what are you asking exactly, for Burleson to say, have we spoken to, have we ever captured these things? Because basically Burleson's getting at Skinny Bob type video. How have
Yeah.
we sat down and spoken to, or have we received communications, let's go three body problem style wow signal? That's what was being asked here. That Lou's answer went down a bit of a fluffy route, and it's also, I think his final one does the same. So for me, either qualify it, maybe Burleson should ask a better question, but that for me was a bit of a deflection, and I think a bit of a answer. But again, I feel Lou will get the shit on this from me, because he was the only one that could really give any kind of decent answer at all anyway. So
Yeah, that's true.
everything had, and this is my point, everything had to be directed to him. Same way, if right now my football team Rangers have a player who is utter shit, right? He's a striker, but he's the only striker we have got fit. He's not particularly great, but he has good games and bad games. But because he plays so often, he's always getting judged on good, bad, and different.
Sure.
So you don't have any other options. And this was what it was like, I think, at this point for me with this panel. Gallaudet wasn't bringing anything to it. Schellenberger couldn't. Gold, God bless him, was just lovely sitting there in the corner. Lou was the only one that they could ask. And I feel the questions were so varied that you would as well just having Lou Elizondo sitting there and them ask him questions.
I was just gonna say, I have a note here saying, for me, Lou is the standout here, and I almost wish that he was on his own in this hearing, just to field all of the questions. I think it would have been more productive. I think questions like this non-verbal one, they could have gone into with a lot more depth,
Uh-huh.
and the senators could have followed up and said, "That's not what I meant. This is what I'm getting at." And then maybe Lou could have said, "Well, we've got to look at these non-verbal cues as communication, because we don't
Yeah.
have a shared language base," and blah 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 blah. But yeah, it was at this point for me as well, where I was like, I'm kind of annoyed by these other people being here now. I think they're taking valuable time away from what we're actually here to talk about, according to Mace's briefing at the opening statement.
So, on that, Dan, next up, Representative William Timmins. He asks Lou about the frequency of events. Lou says there's better equipment now to track. I then, at this point, thought, if we had had this hearing, because at this point I could see online loads of people slating this hearing. People genuinely weren't happy, okay?
Sure.
If we had had this hearing first last year, if it had been these four witnesses, I think people generally, or I would have at least went, that was pretty good. Lou came across well, and the other witnesses played a part. We didn't have that, though. We had Grush last year, and Grush was Infinity War to this being Black Adam. For those who have
Oh, I thought
seen,
you were going to go with Thor 2. Black Adam's so much worse.
so if anyone's not seen Black Adam yet, not a particularly good comic book movie, but if it was the first comic book movie before Iron Man, Dan, like before that series and before we had regular
Yeah.
comic book movies, you'd have probably watched Black Adam and went, oh, that was really good.
Yeah, for a 90s comic book movie, yeah, par for the course. It was
Yeah.
all right. It was a good time at the cinema, but
So
after the bar's been raised.
my sentiment, though, Dan, to you is that if we had this one first, this would have been much better looked upon than it is now.
Yeah, I think so. I would agree with that. It also kind of felt like, yeah, you kind of want these two tracks to come together, right? Grush and Elizondo, they work together. We know that now from that Q&A. So we've got these two puzzle pieces, and for me, I wasn't as down on this, but I did expect more from it. But I really want to see what the next one looks like, because we can't have this again. It can't just be soft like this again. Like, by now we have enough that actual witnesses should be coming forward. And I made a little list at the end of this saying,
See,
okay,
on that,
based on everything that's been said,
I don't mind you
these
going
are
into
the
that now,
people.
but let me
Sure.
let me ask you though. So then, what we don't need are names that we know enough from. And to
Yep.
be fair, Lou has put everything he can in a book. To which, you know, we didn't even mention Luna slapped that down when Lou mentioned his book.
Yeah, she does not want to
She
read the books.
no, I think she felt it was a bit of a cheap plug for his book, and she was asking a question she wanted an answer to. I don't think
And
Lou was being
Lou
flippant.
did address that in his Q&A. He said that he wasn't trying to plug his book. It was more that he was kind of saying, this is the line that I've been told I can go to, and I can't go any further, and you're asking me to go further, which I thought was a fair answer. But in the actual interaction in the hearing, it did feel a little like that.
I forget, did Lou have his book on the table?
No,
No, he didn't
I
have
don't
his
think
book
so.
next to him.
I'm not. I would say I'm
Can't remember.
95% sure he didn't.
Okay.
Just that paper name, badges,
Yeah.
and those tiny bottles of water, because Lou's a big guy, so
Yeah.
tiny bottles of water.
So, in terms of that, she wanted answers to the questions, and it wasn't the time and place to mention that, albeit, like you say, we brought it up in the spirit of it. But we don't need someone who has spilled everything he can. Very much appreciative of that already. So, in the same breath, I am now in a place where I don't want to see Chris Mellon speak at one of these, because I don't know what Chris Mellon would do that he could say publicly other than I can say in a skiff, or he's already said on numerous interviews. And again, this isn't a dig at Mellon or Elizondo. These people have given up so much of their time on TV, news broadcasts, articles, podcasts, blogs, whatever it might be. They've said what they can say. We need people who have said a lot less, like a Nell, who I imagine is on your list, like Eric Davis, who is someone that you would think is pretty high up in this. I'd have Hal Puthoff in one of these things potentially. I know he's done some interviews, but he's a lot more reserved in what he said. I imagine he knows a lot more. I'd have Jay Stratton in these kind of things, Lakatsky in these sorts of things. People who have said a lot less or been a lot less public and haven't been doing all kinds of journalistic endeavors so far, because I think that would speak to what you said of we can't do this again.
Yeah. Funny that your list, actually, not a million miles away.
Go on.
So I would have Mellon there, but only so Mellon could introduce first-hand witnesses, because I feel like he has the qualifications and the experience to make it feel as big as it should. Stratton, I'd also have there.
Yep.
Both were mentioned multiple times during this hearing. I'd be surprised if either of them, shocked, quite frankly, if either of them weren't called to testify next time. But then I'd also have, and I don't know who, these people would be nameless, but Lockheed, CIA, and this kind of materials issue. Someone there needs to be subpoenaed to talk about this. And I'd want to hear from someone at Lockheed, someone from the inside there saying, yes, I can confirm this. Like no more kind of water treading on this. No.
Do you think we've heard enough?
Because yeah, and
again, I don't mean disparagingly like that with these people. I mean, but they've probably said as much as they can publicly.
Yeah, they have. And the thing, like, I don't want the CIA there, to be honest, because I just
said the CIA.
Say again.
You just said the CIA.
No, sorry. The involved in that Lockheed CIA kind of Bigelow kind of transfer, but someone from the Lockheed side of it, from the private industry side of it, that's willing to come forward and talk about that. I think that would have much more impact, because it confirms a piece of the sub puzzle that we haven't heard anything from anyone inside Lockheed about this.
And see, on all of this, I think I'm trying to say this that people don't think, oh, Andy's bashing on Elizondo or Mellon or that. Absolutely not. me and you are big fans of Tom DeLonge. I don't want to see Tom DeLonge at this point
No,
testifying in front of
no.
Congress. Tom said plenty. Like,
Yep.
it needs to be.
And I mean, let's be honest. Tom had 3 hours of conversation with Joe Rogan, and it went badly. He wouldn't do much better in front of Congress, and I've got to think that he'd be the kind of person that would go, me, no, like, no, you want these people here. Talk to the general that talk to Tom DeLonge, talk to Neil McCaslin.
Yeah,
you know, these people that informed these people that are bringing it to us as the public face of it. And then lastly, Schallenberger's witness. You know, there's a lot in that document that's a big accusation, and it's real entertaining. There are some red flags throughout it. You know, the UAP acronym changes almost on every page. It goes from aerial to anomalous in various different points of it, to the point where I was like, is 2 people writing this? It also ends with that whole be not afraid thing, which I just kind of rolled my eyes at, because it doesn't feel like the same language as like an official report would have or something like that. So lots of flags there, lots to dig into, green and red flags. It's time for that witness to step up. You know, Tim Burchett is putting up that UAP Whistleblower Protections Act. Let's get that through. Let's get that witness in front of Congress talking to the public, because, you know, enough with the dog and pony show. That goes for AARO, that goes for this side of it as well.
I've seen a few people ask, and people have emailed me asking either they think it's Grush or Elizondo that wrote the document. What would you say to those 2 names?
So I've seen other names passed around, people from the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and things like that. There wasn't language in there. You know, having spoken to Lou as I have, there wasn't language in there that made me feel that was Lou's language. Grush can't really say either way. I haven't spent a lot of time talking to him. But there's not a lot of crossover between what's in that document and what Grush has said. It's perfectly possible that what Immaculate Constellation is could have been what Grush's op-ed was about, right? But without that being out there, I can't say. I'm doing an AARO. Like, without the data, I just can't say.
Yeah.
So maybe, but like I said, with Lou, I don't think so. There's that paragraph in there about, you know, essentially Lou was right in a paragraph, which was odd to me and stuck out, you know, like a red flag. I don't get the sense that Lou would be that clumsy if he was to do something like that. Of course, I'm saying that with the chandelier photo and stuff like that out there. So this is just my, you know, 2 cents. Like, maybe, but I think
it'd be very brash. It'd be very brash.
Would, right?
Sit next to your own report anonymously in front of Congress and be like, you know, like, I wrote that, but you don't know that.
And he distanced himself from it and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I just couldn't say, but I hope that it's from someone that we haven't met yet.
Yeah.
And so are the claims of it being correct, the witnesses that have corroborated
Yeah.
that Schallenberger said he's spoken to, that they are people we haven't met yet. But those people, if that document is to continue having any weight, those people need to show their faces. And I say that with respect. We need the whistleblower protections. We need to protect people like them. They need to come forward. This is a kind of a group deal, you know, protect them, then get them forward.
Really interesting, Dan. Up next, someone has managed to basically create human life out of Reddit, the forum, and in the form of Lauren Boebert, brought it to life. So if you're going to sit there and talk about flat Earth, birds being cameras or drones, human genetic manipulation, etc., I am sure there was a percentage of folks on UFO subreddits and UFOX who would have been loving that. This is why there is a time and place for certain conversations to be had. And I'm not comparing it, but an extreme I would use that the public aren't ready for and why we still don't hear it is the experiencer conversation.
Sure.
And I've mentioned that before. I enjoy seeing it the way it's been represented in some documentaries recently because it's very well done. I don't think it's ready given where we're at just now in these political settings, because that needs more public on board first to then take it up a notch and really introduce them to that level of the conversation. Lauren Boebert was awful here. And yeah, this was Reddit and TikTok had a baby, and this is what happened. She was just so and if she's your representative, folks, and you love her, fine, but awful, god awful.
Yeah, same. As soon as, I mean, the flat earth and the bird stuff, if people want to like know where that comes from, the guy who made that birds aren't real thing literally made a video showing that that's like a satire, that he wanted to see which conspiracy kind of forums and stuff picked it up. So if you still believe that, God help you, you know.
Dan, listen, it might be true. Do you know what? Maybe they are a biological
birds are real.
camera.
I've run over them by accident. I've seen their innards.
But well, I'm sorry, but Lou talks about non-verbal communication and stuff. Maybe these are just another life form's cameras or drones, because what a great way to hide yourself than among the wildlife of another planet.
Someone's going to clip that out.
That's fine. However, don't sit in front of Congress, your peers and colleagues and military officialdom and say that. Just don't. It's not the time and place for it. And it comes across that to me is, you know, when I see people queuing up to go, and hi to the folks who attended these hearings who listen, but if you're queuing up and I go, please God, no one from the public embarrass the topic by doing or saying something ridiculous, you know, like standing up with a sign or something like you see in a Hollywood movie, or shout about Area 51 or something that you go, oh God, or wearing a tinfoil hat. This is the equivalent of that.
Like a big sign saying, "We are all star seeds, all hail Pleiadians."
Yeah,
be like,
right
oh my
before
God.
the UFO goes over the Empire State Building and blows it to bits. Another Independence Day reference. For a reason, Dan,
totally
I'll tell you
agree
later. But Mace then finishes her questions. She asked Lou about being read into SAPs, special access programs. He, particularly Immaculate Constellation, he can't admit to being read into those, which isn't a no. That's just a yes, isn't it?
Can't confirm or deny, wasn't it?
Yes. Otherwise, he would just say no.
Yeah, and like these things, you know, it could just be that he doesn't want to talk about it on the off chance that it is real. But at the same time, there's so much ammo there now for the community to go, wait, you were read into Immaculate Constellation. So yeah,
we hope
it's clear that Lou has, you know, having signed that document with crash retrievals and his work with David Grush dealing with UAP imagery, it's clear that Lou has handled UAP imagery from sensors that are multispectral. It's clear that Lou has been involved in crash retrievals, whether that's just looking at documents from crash retrieval or going to a site and retrieving something. Couldn't say. But those two things are clear from these kind of non-answers that are given, I would say.
He's asked about if certain material is given to certain contractors because of its source. For example, if something was retrieved underwater, would it go to, say, Boeing or Lockheed because they are experts in that kind of stuff? He says, yes, that just makes sense. Different contractors with a different expertise and different departments to deal with different things. Lou is asked what Lockheed's expertise is. He says aerospace, which makes sense. It's basically the title of the company. Mace asks Schellenberger how we get more whistleblowers to come forward. He says if they come forward to him, he will protect their identities, and these hearings are important. Not a good answer. That's like, you know, how do we get folks to come forward? Oh, they come and tell me. Then that's not what we need.
Yeah, that was as bad as AARO, right? Like it was like a little bit of self-promotion. Like, no, that's not what the question was getting at. She wants to know how they can get them forward. That should have been the place to talk about protections and a proper system for Congress.
Have you seen Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, where the child snatcher has the lollipops round the thing? And it's like, come on, kids, ice cream, lollipops, candy floss. And they run in and it all falls off. And it's like, ha, I've caught you. I feel that's what AARO, not I'm saying Michael Schellenberger's doing that, but that's kind of what AARO were doing to witnesses back in the day.
Schellenberger just in a long coat outside Congress and lollipops.
Yep. Not realizing that it was actually all a plan. So Mace then asks each of them to define non-human biologics and intelligence. Gallaudet says it's not a stretch to think in a universe there are higher intelligences and beings, and it's something from out there. I can't remember what he said, but I've put down Lou's answer was a bit of a nothing answer.
He said the ability to react to stimulus.
Yeah, not
Which
again the vein what was being asked.
It's but on the other side of it, when we're talking about life and how we define life, like Lou touched on a lot of that. He was like, well, it's really difficult to define life. And I really don't think enough people realize that we don't have a definition for life. So
That's not
when
the
we
setting for
find
this. That's not
something,
what was being asked.
it's not, but I'm going to talk about it anyway.
Go on.
That we just don't have a definition for life. So when
Yep.
it comes to us finding something and saying, is that life? We can't say. There's literally nothing. So the best we've got right now is, does it react to us? Does it do something in reaction to a stimulus? Like Lou said, it's a crap answer, but it is the best that science has. And like, I just would have, again, liked a bit more elaboration there about, well, how do we get to a definition of life? Like, how can we actually work towards something that's actionable? Yeah.
Two different conversations for me then. That one, Congress is asking the wrong questions, and two, the wrong answers are being given. And either the people giving those answers are deliberately giving roundabout answers or not quite reading the room, given they know what the day is. Yeah, so for me, Schellenberger was like, I don't know, which fine. It wouldn't matter what Schellenberger said anyway.
By this point in the hearing, it's like, oh, don't even answer.
Yeah, well, I was at that point with it. And Mike Gold probably had the most interesting one about it could be artificial intelligence, could be machines. Bear in mind, Dan, my point here, especially on the low stuff, the audience watching this, the public perception, all that stuff, and basically what's being said throughout anyway about intelligent life and, UAP are real and all that kind of stuff. There's an opportunity there to really get the attention of some folks, and it's an opportunity missed. And I'm sure Lou
Sure,
does say in his book different. So there is an allusion to non-human biologics being alien life and Roswell being real, we've got alien bodies. That's what's being asked here. Don't miss the boat. That was frustrating for me.
Yeah, sure. I totally hear you. And to this question, Mike Gold had the most interesting answer. Intelligence could be biological, it might not. The ultimate answer will surprise us all. That's a hook. Like he I don't know if he's been media trained, but goddamn, like that's intriguing. Like,
and that's what I mean. So you're watching that. If you're a member of the public sitting watching this that hasn't read Lou Elizondo's book, he's gave a bit of a nothing answer. If you're listening, you're Schellenberger, you're going fucking waste of time. Gallaudet gives a bit of a bit of generic, but okay, out there, space aliens essentially. But Gold gets your attention. If you're a member of the public and this guy's going, look, we don't know, but how interesting could it be? Like you say, and then it could be AI, it could be, and he gives some potential, he gives some food for thought. It's the end. It's about, we thought it was the end of the hearing.
Yes.
Leave the public, leave the people wanting more, leave them with a hook, leave them with something to cling on to. I'm sure the four witnesses were sitting there at that point thinking, I wish they'd asked me this and I wish they'd asked me that, because I feel Congress as a whole didn't perform particularly well here. I think we've called out the individuals who done well. I would like to think those witnesses at that point thought, this is my last chance to get a good point in here and really make something tangible and give them something to sink their teeth into. And I felt that was largely missed. Like you say, maybe me watching it along with a load of other people, seeing all their comments, being disappointed and whatnot at the time as well, that may have had an impact on that. Maybe if I'd watched it afterwards on my own, maybe be slightly different. I still feel those answers, I was looking for more. So, hey-ho. But it wasn't the end, was it, Dan?
It wasn't. No, we had a 11th hour edition who came in with a bit of swagger and was welcome to "You're just in time, babe" from Nancy Mace.
Can I say, Representative Andy Ogles cashed in his Congress in the Bank briefcase for the wrestling fans out there, and basically crashed the party. And Dan, I'm glad he did, because Ogles was decent. for a guy
Yeah.
who literally rocked up late. He wasn't there from the beginning, folks. He literally came in like, oh shit, sorry, have I missed it? And they were like, no, it's fine. We'll give you 5 minutes. Do you want to take this one away, Dan?
Yeah, sure. So he came in late, and he kind of gave this really. It was almost like they couldn't have planned it better. He did such a good roundup of the whole thing, just real concise. He said, "Well, it's clear there's something going on." He asked a lot of questions that kind of brought it back to what really they were there to discuss, which is whether Congress had oversight, which it was clear they didn't.
Yep.
He reminded everyone of that fact just as they were closing out. He got Lou to say that lots of sensitive locations seem to be under some sort of monitoring, and if they were, go on.
Lou's best answer. That's
Yes.
what Lou should have been saying. So this was what I was trying to get at, Dan. That was like someone asked him a good question and he gave a good answer.
Sure.
That's the kind of stuff I was like, he was there for that kind of stuff. He wasn't being
sure.
asked the right questions for the most part beforehand. And I'm not saying with the one I talked about previously where I was disappointed that he needed to give the answer himself. So, for example, in my day job, if I'm training someone, we'll do like mock conversations for like selling satellite TV, right?
Sure.
You can be a customer who's really awkward. And sometimes if a customer's not, you'll have to give someone information they've not really asked you for, but you're trying to help them along. That's what I
Yes,
wanted
I
to
know
see more
exactly
of.
what you're getting at.
Because
It's like,
Congress's questions weren't asking the right thing.
yeah, it's kind of like, you know how politicians have this knack that when a media asks them questions, they'll just talk about something unrelated because
Yeah.
that's what they want to talk about.
Yeah.
That's kind of how this should have gone with, oh, you've spoken to me about communication. Cool. Well, I'm going to talk to you about a purported landing at Warren Air Base where a deal was made between ET and, it's not what they've asked about, but this is the interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a tricky balance. It really is. But Ogles came in with some really good questions to allow some emphasis on this kind of stuff. He finished up with just putting the exclamation mark over the fact that the UAP pose a threat to personnel, that the lack of transparency infringes on legislative oversight responsibilities of Congress. It's being hid from Congress and there's no accountability to it. The Congress must know. And if anyone stops them from knowing, that's criminality. I thought that was a great note to end on. It wasn't planned that he came in, but I'm glad that he did. I thought he did a great job.
Spot on. See, between what you've said there about the criminality and getting Lou to talk about how the sites that are particularly heavy research and development focused, they are the best sites for cutting edge technology and they seem to be under some sort of surveillance. Fantastic. Brilliant.
Yeah, great.
So surveillance by who? Are you saying we've got foreign adversaries, Russia, China, surveilling our best sites?
Yep.
Potentially. Is it something else? Do we have any evidence of that? What reports? Cool. Crack on from there. That didn't happen throughout the time. So yeah, Ogles, well done for coming in late to the party. I would like to think, Dan, although it's been more than 5 days, this was on the 13th of November, Congress had 5 days to submit additional questions to the witnesses for answering.
Yep.
I'll need to chase up as well. I don't know. I've not seen anything online to see if that has been done yet or if indeed anything was asked, but I'd like to think some follow-ups were done. Overall, Dan, hearing-wise, I'll stick with, if this had come first and then we got the Grush hearing, this would have had a far bigger impact. This never touched the sides in the same way that the Grush hearing did, which I think was disappointing. I'm glad it happened. I think it's really important that Lou finally went up in front of Congress and spoke, because that was always going to be something held over him as well from people who are naysayers or doubters saying, oh, well, he's never done this. He's finally done it. There you go. Brilliant. Lou Elizondo has done his part. He's helped get those videos out. He's released his book. He said loads of stuff. He's now done it in front of Congress. We need different Lou Elizondos, different Dave Grushes. If there's Bob Lazars out there who are working in these programs still now, we need to hear from them. Maybe James Fox's documentary can get some anonymous sources, which then come forward in the next ones. I don't know, but we need to move on from this, because it sounds like even Grush's hearing, which I think we all loved what came from that, a lot was said. There was very little action off the back of it that we can see, and that frustration spilled over even to this hearing. So I don't know quite where we go from here yet, but yeah, I don't know. Thoughts?
Yeah, that's fair. Watching it away from like the the hype and the drive of kind of the community, I came away with the impression that Congress seemed really engaged. They seem really goddamn annoyed, and it's clear that we're going to get more hearings and work in the future. We'll see some more legislation. We already have Tim Burchett, Gillibrand. These are all good things, you know. Wind the clock back 10 years, and this is a goddamn miracle that we're seeing any of this. And I think
In
it's
a week.
important to keep that in perspective. In a week, yeah, 2
Yeah.
UAP hearings in a week. That we've got to keep that in perspective. Sure, it wasn't the greatest thing in the world, but it's still great that it happened. I completely agree. What we need to see now is action on the parts of the Congress people, the officials, the House representatives. Like I said earlier, Trump has just won the White House, the House, and the Senate. No excuses. You've got the entire government behind you now if you want to go ahead and do this. So let's get it done. Let's see some action. Let's see, some steps forward on this. Where we've seen, enough people now to say, I hate the phrase, but there's a there. Congress are convinced of it too. They want answers. We've got scientists on record in hearings saying, we're happy to study it. Let us study it. So let them study it. Let's get it going. This whole thing reminded me of the thing that Lou said a while back. Disclosure is a marathon, not a sprint. This wasn't a sprint. This wasn't a 10-meter baton pass. It really feels like a marathon. It's just like, there's another corner to go around. There's more road ahead of us. And that's how I feel right now. We're not done. We can't even see the finish line on this thing. But it's going to carry on because it's going to carry on. There's just more to unveil. So the proof in the pudding is going to be where we go next. So let's see. Next hearing, I want to see everything kind of starting to come together. It would even be wonderful to see John Goslowski next to someone like Lou and have them talk to each other, and actually challenge each other when someone says, "Oh, AARO stopped me doing this," and John objects to it, and then they can object, and it would be a great conversation that was very revealing for many reasons. So yeah, action. Let's get going.
If anyone thinks I'm completely down on the whole thing, put it this way. I am glad I can be disappointed at the fact we've had 2 hearings in a week in the US from the Congress and the Senate, all about UFOs. That's a good place to be disappointed with. That's the way I feel. So, just to finish off on a couple of questions, Dan. Some of them I've kind of answered within the body of what we've said, but we'll just fly over them, folks, because we've been recording nearly 3 hours and I can't feel my feet at this point, Dan. So, first question from S. Nyhart. Hi. I am not as knowledgeable as you all are, but here are some questions and thoughts for you and Dan. Trust me, you probably are. I like the opening statements. I like to declassify anything older than 15 years or 15 months if you're Dan. He's very impatient. Although I wish they would have specified Roswell, for heaven's sake. It's way past time. Retribution needs to be dealt with right now, not later. America needs to quit using 3-lettered agencies against our good citizens. Gold seemed to be there for another agenda. I wonder who put him there. Taking over for Nell, perhaps. I thought he was talking to grade school kids. What did we think of Biggs' time? And finally, why did we dislike Bobert? I think we covered why we didn't like Bobert, to be fair.
Yeah.
Biggs...
She was the only kind of embarrassing one. I thought everyone else was all right to really good. Tippy top there being Ogles for me. Mace, second place. Biggs was solid, seemed engaged, seemed interested. I can't really ask for more than that from people that are just showing their face in the space for the first time. God, that was hard to say.
And he also took the angle of the it took the angle of that overclassification stuff. So yeah,
Yep.
it was like, do you feel that they were a little bit maybe disjointed in their questioning? That did they all meet up beforehand and speak to each other and say, I'm going to ask about this, I'm going to ask about this, okay, we're going to duplicate, so can you ask about this instead? Rather
Yeah.
than maybe it be so disjointed the way it was. I don't even know how that would necessarily work, or if they even talk to each other outside
Well,
of these. But
they should. I agree. They totally should, because it maximizes their time, right? And we've even done it with past interviews where we kind of will look at another episode of someone else's show and kind of go, well, they asked that, let's not ask that again. You know,
yeah.
you'll pick a question then that actually advances that line of questioning. If podcasters can do it, so should senators.
Ryan says, I agree with a lot of your comments. I think that was from the instant reaction one. Will there be a skiff now? I also thought Rep Luna was amazing. She appeared to be well prepared, had relevant questions. I noticed the numbers on X were over 300,000, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's wild.
Do you think there's going to be a skiff off the back of this, Dan? I'm just going to say no if they've struggled so badly for Grush.
I mean, there has to be. Just in the sense that, you know, there was enough given. Lou has his clearance. There's been some questions around Dave Grush getting his clearance back because he doesn't have it for whatever reason. I don't think they have that same problem with Lou.
David says, it's been a year and a half since the last one, and still Congress hasn't been able to validate Grush's allegations. Seriously, you don't think they have the wherewithal to check that story out? Bullshit. The cigarette smoking man ain't that good. Congress is not serious about this investigation. They're merely pandering to their true believer constituents. I'll keep that last line off, David. Sorry, but I'm not going to read that one out. Yeah, that's an opinion, so fair enough. And we kind of covered that within there, Dan, didn't we? That about Grush's allegations and why Congress may or may not know exactly what was said or why it's not been said. I think that's going to happen with the fullness of time if it does.
Yeah, I completely agree. Congress needs to talk to Grush on his own in a skiff. That hasn't happened so far yet. They're just talking to agencies and being like, hey, have you got any of this? And they're just going, no. And then they're going, okay, and then leaving. Not really convincing investigation there. The fact that they mentioned the cigarette smoking man as well, I just want to throw in a mention for David Jakovny's podcast, Fail Better. He hosted Gillian Anderson this week, and
I've not watched it.
It's great. If you were an X-Files fan, you'll love it. A big dose of nostalgia and some brutal honesty from both of them. I was really touched and moved by the whole thing, so I recommend people listen to it.
Pat shared a few thoughts, including, I still assert the government will never tell us anything. To do so would be to admit lying or incompetence, neither of which they will do. If you want answers, you're going to have to involve scientific folks. We have had many hearings in the last decades and achieved nothing. People are unaware of that history, maybe, but we are beating a dead horse here. You know what they say about doing the same thing over and over again, expecting an answer? Insanity. All I'll say, Pat, is, and I'm sure Dan will agree, we've not achieved nothing as much as we can be downtrodden about this. There's been no loss here. There's been no regression. There have been small wins. And if anything, it still does get a small amount more of the public's attention on the subject. At the same time, you've got George Knapp's documentaries, the James Fox documentary, the Beyond documentary. Lou's book's only been out a few months. He's doing his tour off the back of that. There is still a lot going on that people are getting involved in as well. So Netflix is probably a good barometer for content, that they have had quite a lot of UFO stuff the last few months, some good, some bad, some indifferent in my opinion, but that's still an interest, a public interest indicator, isn't it, Dan? So I think these do have their place. And when I spoke to Brian Bender, that interview will be out next week, he does make the point, these kind of hearings maybe don't push things forward, but they do keep the heat on, and that can be important.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Brian said there. That's what they're for, and that's why I wanted to read that opening statement from Nancy Mace there, because I think our desires for those hearings and why those hearings are taking place are often at odds. You know, everyone wants to see Lou put materials on the desk and show pictures of bodies and stuff like that. That was never ever on the table. So the expectation's kind of out of whack. There's something to be said for certain people in the community really overhyping these things, and saying things about like secret witnesses and so on and so forth, that, you know, just chill a little bit, because that kind of big hype just leads to big letdown again. I've got to agree with the whole history part of it. I think a lot of that is going to end up being swept under the rug when this new discovery, and I'm doing new in bunny ears if you can't see me, is made because of the embarrassment of the decisions of people in the past that might not be kind of looked upon fondly. You know, you've only got to look at how the US government talks about J. Edgar Hoover running the CIA to see that, you know, he's not a great hero. He's someone that made some really questionable decisions and just morally kind of bankrupt in some areas. And they're like, yeah, he ran that. And that's about it. You know, that happened. No one's giving him props. I think a lot of people in the past that have touched this issue are going to be seen in that way. And yeah, we're kind of almost starting over. I totally agree with these kind of baby steps forward. It's not for nothing at all. We've made big progress, as I said, from 10 years ago to hearings now. Like, wow, that's crazy. Like, it was only 2017 we were celebrating the front page of the New York Times, and now we've had 2 hearings in a week. Like, that's nuts. Smell the roses. Also, props to Knapp. I just wanted to say props to Knapp for his show. I minced through that this week. Rinsed through it, sorry. And thought it was wonderful, not overly sensational, very matter of fact. I think Knapp and the production crew did a fantastic job, and I was really intrigued by that video they filmed of the orb going into the water.
Arthur says, hearing was as expected. There weren't any massive revelations. It just moved the general public's view on the topic down the needle a bit, away from decades of stigma. And as government consultants, Lou and Tim will always be bound by NDAs. Mr. Corbell will have egg on his face after the hype, but people should not expect any whistleblower just to show up to tell all and go to jail. Baby steps. Don't look to government to tell all. People will be waiting a very long time, 80 years and counting. I've got a few big comments and stuff, Dan. I think we'll keep for maybe another day, folks, because this has gone almost 3 hours now. So we'll call it a day there, Dan. From the start of part 1, though, you mentioned a couple of things. Do you want to just go back over those, Dan? Because
oh, yeah, for sure.
Mentioning at the end.
December 16th, we're going to see the release of James Fox's new documentary, The Program, which is said to feature some new whistleblowers and things like that. You can pre-order that at any of your favorite streaming places, Apple TV, Amazon, YouTube, you know, wherever you get it. In the UK, it's $6.49 on pre-order at the moment. So go get that in quickly, because that feels a little cheap, like someone's put the wrong number in.
Can I just stress on that as well, Dan? And it's not just that, you know, we like James and personally we like his product and stuff. James got screwed over with his previous works, and the amount of effort and time he put into those, he made no money from them because the company completely shafted him. So if you appreciate what James Fox does, the time he puts into the documentaries, the care, what he's trying to produce and trying to bring, then go out your way and spend a couple of pound. I know every penny's a prisoner for folks in modern days, and listen, just trying to keep the heating on in people's houses can be tough, but if you can, I'm sure James would appreciate you going out and grabbing a copy of that. Like Dan says, I think $6.49 is incredibly reasonable. That'll be about $9, probably $9.99 or something. You'll spend more on a cinema ticket or a big coffee or a beer or something at the weekend. So I'm sure you'd appreciate that. And James will be on in a couple of weeks to talk about that documentary as well. So yeah, and your other one, Dan, your own shameless plug.
Oh yeah, my own shameless plug. Or just say it's holidays, people are looking for UFO gifts and things like that. All my UFO art is available, including, you know, podcast t-shirts, hoodies, hats, all those kind of things. If you go to toinfinity.redbubble.com, you can get whatever your heart desires, from mugs to shirts to phone cases to dog mats if you want. Shower curtains, for some reason, they sell. But yeah, that's all there if people are interested.
Awesome. Dan, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. We are almost at 3 hours now. So I'm going to go and start warming up. I would ask folks, if you want to check out any of those interviews, the George Knapp ones just happened. Thanks to folks who have checked it out already. It's up on YouTube. This is obviously, there's no point in advertising this one. You've listened to it. It's not as if that would make any sense whatsoever.
Listen to us talk about the hearing soon.
Unless you've not listened to the first part yet, and just went to part 2 for some reason. Go back and listen to part 1. Go back and listen to it again overnight. Leave it on with the adverts playing. Yeah. And interview with Brian Bender has been recorded already. Really interesting chat from a journalistic point of view as well. Recorded before the hearings, so we were or before the Senate hearing, we were just kind of sharing thoughts on that. So that'll be out next week for folks. And yeah, I'll let folks know in the coming weeks about the guests for December. That's all kind of planned through into New Year. That should be everything. Thank you very much for your time, and speak to you all very, very soon.